Lights are going up, snow is falling down. There's a feeling of goodwill around town. It could only mean one thing. McRib is here. People throwing parties, ugly sweaters everywhere. Stockings hung up by the chimney with care. It could only mean one thing. McRib is here.
At participating McDonald's for a limited time.
There are so many reasons to travel. Apogee Travel is giving you a new one, and it's real good. With Apogee Travel, you get the same hotel deals as all the other booking sites, but now you can support charities you care about at the same time. You don't have to change where you go, what you do, or how much you pay. All you have to change is where you book. You pick your hotel deal, choose your charity to support, and enjoy your trip. Simple as that. Apogee Travel is changing the booking industry for good. Book your next trip and make a real difference at apogeetravel.com or download the Apogee Travel mobile app in the app stores.
Why get all your holiday decorations delivered through Instacart? Because maybe you only bought 2 wreaths but have 12 windows. Or maybe your toddler got very eager with the advent calendar. Or maybe the inflatable snowman didn't make it through the snowstorm. Or maybe the twinkle lights aren't twinkling. Whatever the reason, this season, Instacart's here for hosts and their whole holiday haul. Get decorations from the Home Depot, CVS, and more through Instacart and enjoy free delivery on your first 3 orders. Service fees and terms apply.
This episode brought to you by the following patrons: Legos and Blueberries, Leaf Girl, Sex Caliber Bones a Lot, Madeline, Alyssa, Vixen, Holly, Natasha, Laura, Jeremy with the Laser Eyes, Allie, Logan, Libby, Aaron, Kristen, Tia, and Jonathan. And all the patrons want you to know you're loved, you're listened to, and you're a valuable member of this awesome Horror Virgin community. And if you want to hang out with us, do so in the Facebook group where we'll be doing the Time Warp daily. So I got these mics. They're like wireless mics. I got them for video shoots, honestly.
Okay.
And I wonder if we could use them as like backups.
My only thing about me using it, and I only know this because unfortunately I've been mic'd up many a time and sound people have had to navigate around it. Tough to put things on my chest because the boobs move around.
Yeah. Before we get started, sorry about your huge tits, Paige, first off.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just going to make that the first laugh line out of nowhere. Like, they're going to have zero context for that. It's just going to be that and no
Sorry,
context.
sound guys. I brought my own booms. Thank you for tuning into Horror Virgin. I'm Paige.
And I'm your Horror Virgin, Todd, which means I don't like scary movies. But this week, Paige didn't make us watch one because she gave me the gift of watching literally one of my favorite movies. And that is The Rocky Horror Picture Show. So, Paige, I'm assuming that this is the first time you've seen this movie because it's such a small, unknown movie that no one knows about.
Absolutely not.
So, okay, when was the first time you saw it?
So the first time I saw this was in film school.
Really?
Yeah,
You didn't see this until college?
No, because it was not something, like, it was known in our home. Like, I knew it existed, but there wasn't a theater locally that did live showings.
Wow, okay.
And we didn't have it on DVD.
I guess you were outside of San Francisco. You weren't in San Francisco, right?
Right, exactly.
Or Oakland or whatever, right? So, okay.
Right.
Because, like, definitely San Francisco has midnight showings of this. It probably
100%.
has since the 70s.
Yes, but fun thing about San Francisco, not a super safe place for a 17 or 18-year-old to be at midnight.
No, just ask the Tenderloin. Yeah, no, it's not a safe place
which
for you
is
to be.
where it is.
That's where this would be,
That's
for
where
sure.
the screening
I
would
bet they're
be,
doing a screening of it right now as you're listening to this, and it does not matter when you're listening to this.
When
That's
you're
just how the
listening to this.
Tenderloin be.
Yeah, that's how it, well, and not even, it would be in the Mission District or in the Castro.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. But in the 70s, it would have been Tenderloin.
It was the Tenderloin, yes.
Yeah.
Because I did do a deep dive on research for this. We'll get to it as we get to it.
It's weird that I'm like shoehorning in specific California like geography.
Right.
Normally, that's your wheelhouse, Paige.
Normally.
But it's because I listened to the band Train and it's mentioned in one of their songs. And I was like, are they singing about a cut of meat like this? And so I looked it up.
They're singing about the first place I was ever catcalled, and I was 11.
Oh, Paige.
Yes, it's not a great place. Now, there are many socioeconomic factors that have dictated why it's not a great place.
Yes, of course.
But we can't get into that now. We've got other things to talk about.
This isn't a Purge episode.
No. But I saw it freshman year. So like literally fresh at college, basically.
Okay. That's probably a good time to see it.
Yes. And I saw it because, and I think I mentioned this, where when I got to college, I pledged my sorority immediately.
Oh, really?
Because
Okay, cool.
I had like one friend from home at the same school as me. And suddenly it was like a way bigger school than I'd ever been to. And so within like a week or two, I met two of the oldest seniors in the chapter.
How old were they? Like 65, 66? Like how senior were they?
I mean, we ate lunch at like 11 a.m.
Oh, they were in bed by 7:30, guys. Are you kidding? They had a 4 a.m. class.
Yeah. They have to get back to Cocoon. But we have never done Cocoon. We've never done Cocoon, Todd.
Paige.
Anyway, they were both like super seniors.
Okay.
So they were like fifth years. And they were like, we're definitely not staying another year. Well, it's super common now to do a fifth year because you can't get your classes lined up.
Is Vanna Wilder instead of Van Wilder at college?
Exactly. I mean, I ended up 5-yearing too, but they were at like the first event where they meet all the new kids. And they were like kind of sitting off to the side, like, we don't need to meet these new kids. We graduate in 8 months or whatever.
Right.
We don't need to get super close to these kids we will not spend time with.
Yeah, they were like, we don't give a shit about Donnie, Mark, Jonathan, Joey, Jordan, or Danny over here.
No, of course not.
Those are the new kids, Paige. New kids on the block.
Ah,
Sorry.
yes,
Yeah.
that's right. I was like, these names do sound familiar in this order.
And Paige, I'm honestly going to tell you, I think I maybe got 80% right at best.
Yeah, who knows? But they, like, at that first event, were like, we're going to sit on the side because, like, this is for the children, right?
Yes.
And I apparently did not get the memo that they were not making friends. And I just like came and sat down. I was like, so I'm a film major. What's up with you guys? Like, hey. And within like whatever the hour or whatever I was there, they were like, oh shit, that freshman's kind of cool.
Oh, wait, these are your two best friends now, aren't they?
Yeah.
I fucking, yes, okay. I did not know this story.
Yeah.
I just knew that you had two friends from college that were a little older than you.
Yes,
and
yes,
this sounds like a great origin story for that.
That they were like, all right, fine.
And I'll tell you why, because it has the part of the hero's journey where they get to refuse the call and
Right.
then you get to win them over. And that's in every story circle. Come on, you guys know it.
Not realizing that that's what I was doing at all.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And then I ended up like that year, like sleeping on their floor a couple times. Like I was just the weird freshman that they were like, I don't know, we kind of like her.
She literally won't go away, though.
She won't go away, but she's kind of fun. And so like,
Oh, of course, yeah.
one of them was a film major also.
That film major, Susan Sarandon. Sorry. I would have been so pissed if this story, like you bury the lead that you went to school with someone in this movie. I'd be like, what the fuck? Sorry. Anyway, go ahead.
I mean, that would be very unlikely given the time difference.
Oh, yeah. You would have gone to school in the 70s, Paige.
In the 70s.
Yeah.
But one of them was a film major, and she was in a class called Camp Colton Trash Cinema,
Oh
a
my
class I would
God.
later go on to audit.
Can I just go sit in that class for a semester? I'll pay. You don't have to give me credit. I want it. I want that class in my body.
I am still Facebook friends with the professor that taught that class.
I, no joke, would love to meet that person. Like, I just want like their watch list.
Oh, I have the list somewhere. We've done a lot of them.
I'm
but
sure.
like,
I love camp so much.
it's like John Waters
Yes.
and a couple different documentaries and this.
Sure.
And so she was in Camp Colton Trash, and they every semester did a field trip where they required everyone in the class to go to a Rocky Horror midnight screening.
Best
And you
professor
like could
ever.
not get out of it. You had to go.
Are you kidding me?
Yes. Didn't matter if you had already been. It was required for the class. And our closest one was on the Queen Mary.
Oh, Paige, the haunted ship in the harbor?
Yes.
Hell yes.
Yes.
I would go there now to watch. Are you kidding me?
They sadly no longer have a crew, but I'll get to it.
Not a live crew, at least.
Not a live
It's a
crew.
haunted crew.
But Heather asked the professor, can I bring this weird freshman? And like that professor was like, really? And she was like, Yes, and we actually brought another sister with us too. So there was like
Nice.
2, and she was like, I guess if they pay for tickets, like, but they don't have any class credit. And she's like, that's not why they're going. It's fun. Don't worry about it. But I had never been before. And if you go, there is your first time, there's often a localized hazing for whatever crew you are seeing.
Right.
And so for me, they drew virgin all over my face in red lipstick.
Yep, that's a thing. When I went and saw it on stage in San Diego, it was my first time to a stage production.
Yeah.
Because I've never seen a midnight showing of this.
Yeah.
But they did that to my face.
Sure.
Like,
yes.
I think it was Magenta in the cast who wrote it on my face.
Yeah, somebody did. I don't remember who did it on mine. This is very long ago, unfortunately, because old.
Right.
About to get on the substance. Don't worry about it. But yeah, then they invited you on stage and mimed sex acts around you and then sent you back to your seat. And that cast, because when you go see a midnight showing, it also has a cast.
Yes.
Because they do a shadow cast in front of it. And so as we go through the movie, I will also talk about the points at which the shadow cast and the movie diverge when you see it live.
Okay, cool.
Or see a midnight screening.
Yeah.
The group that did the Queen Mary at the time had full sets, like a full tank, a full bank of like a wall with switches that lit up. Like,
oh, you mean for like the sonic oscillators page?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but it lit the fuck up.
I love it.
Like, I was like, who built this out of bathroom tile? Like, this is crazy. And so we watched the whole thing. That was great. And then we went to the only place that was open after midnight in Irvine, California at the time, which was Jack in the Box. And I forgot I was wearing face paint that said virgin and was just like sitting and eating Jack in the Box when a fight broke out in the Jack in the Box.
That sounds right. For every Jack in the Box I've been to.
That's about it. It has real, it's not Waffle House energy. It's different, but it's still chaos.
No, I would return to a Waffle House.
Right. Oh, no, I fucking love Jack in the Box. It's the perfect drunk food. Where else are you going to get tacos and egg rolls at the same place in a drive-thru? But so like...
And then shit your brains out 7 hours later. Yeah, that's Jack in the Box.
That's how you get the booze out. That's how you get the booze out.
You're going to go to Jack in the Box, and then you're going to crap the booze out, and you're going to go to
the
class.
booze out.
It's
We're gonna
fine.
be
I'm
good.
in film school.
But so the cops showed up, and... We literally sat in the Jack in the Box and watched the fight. Did not intervene.
You're like, this is better than the Tyson Logan fight.
Yeah, I was just like, I guess this is how 3 a.m. is going today. And like the cops came, and as the cops came, we went outside because we were like, now that cops are involved, this isn't fun. And we went out, and Heather was like, hold on. Take a picture, and posed on the top of the cop car, still in her Rocky Horror gear. I do have that photo.
Oh, I want to see it. Okay, not now, but you'll have to share it with her permission.
I'll have to find it, yes. And reminder, this is a pre-iPhone era. And so they were taken on a digital camera at the time, like an actual one.
Yeah, so it's like pixely and stuff.
Yeah. And there's one of me trying to get a selfie from that same night.
And they say that is the first ever recorded instance of a selfie being taken.
There you go.
That's how long ago it was.
But I do have a few pictures from that night that I will try to unearth. I think they are on Facebook. So
awesome.
Yeah, I will see if I can post them in the group.
Paige, my first time seeing this, I think was like 14 or 15. I was pretty young, and it was in my friend, I'll say his name this time because it's not illegal, Randall's basement. And
good old Randall. I don't even think it was illegal last time, but I do like that we bleeped it.
We snuck into a movie that was not for us, and it was earlier than I saw this movie. Anyway.
Wild
indeed.
Seeing that before this, for sure.
Pretty much all of my debauchery in my youth involved Randall Hensley, or at least his basement, because his parents were awesome and they just let us hang out in the basement. They were sort of the parents, and I think every high school has a few of these, but they were the parents of like, I'd rather the kids do crazy shit here while we're here so we can make sure no one dies, that kind of.
Right.
And they were always there. They were always involved, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, we were in his basement and he was like, hey man, we should watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I was like, I don't like scary movies. And he was like, you'll like this.
Unless you're scared of yourself.
Well, Paige, let me paint a picture of who I was at the time. I was a adolescent in a like strict religious cults. So like,
Sure.
I couldn't even drink soda really. Like we did occasionally and it was like, don't tell anybody we're drinking Diet Dr. Pepper. It was like that sort of vibe, right? So when I saw this movie, and I already knew at the time I liked musicals because my parents liked musicals. So I had watched like 1776, the musical, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, because for some reason, morally, that's better than this movie to the cult I grew up in.
Yeah, people always think that musicals are tame and PG, and it's
wholesome.
Like, rewatch Grease.
Or Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Or Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
So he compares a woman to a cow, marries that woman that day with her consent at least.
Sure.
But then he gaslights his 6 brothers into stealing women from the town. So
Yes.
like, it's a bad movie.
Or like Harvey Girls, where as like an adult you watch it and you're like, oh, this is a brothel.
Yeah. The only one I expected more of that kind of stuff from was Best Little Whorehouse in Texas.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, but it does have Dolly, and that's always worth it.
It does have Dolly.
Also, Burt Reynolds.
Dolly and good music.
I know. Anyway, so like I was a very like, I don't know, I'm a straight white guy, right?
Uh-huh.
But I loved musicals and I was pretty open about that my entire life. Because again, my dad was in musicals growing up. Like my dad would talk about, he was in Oklahoma 3 different times playing the lead and then the bad guy.
That's because everyone does Oklahoma. And everyone forgets that Oklahoma includes both a lot of porn and murder.
Oh yeah. And my dad was very much like, it was way more fun to play the bad guy. That's why I played him twice.
I bet Judd is a blast to play. Yeah.
Oh yeah. But like, so my male role model as a child who was like, no, musicals are great. So I felt very comfortable being open about that, but I did get made fun of it a lot.
Sure.
And that's why Randall, when I was in his basement, we were just like chilling, talking about whatever.
He's like, you're going to fucking love this.
I know. He was like, no, trust me, you'll like it.
It makes no sense and the song slaps.
Yes, that's more or less what it was. And then we got through it. Dude, the Tim Curry reveal of it all. Like, I remember sort of losing my mind at that moment. Like, what the fuck are we watching? I was like, that's not what garments look like. What is he wearing under that cloak? So like, it was probably the first time I'd ever really seen lingerie on a man, like ever, right? Anyway, so like by the time we get to, and it's not my favorite song in the movie, but like Don't Dream It, Be It, I started crying on Randall's couch.
Sure.
This movie changed my life and I realized that's insane to say. But at that moment, I was like, oh yeah, I'm probably not going to live again after this life. So I'm just going to be as authentically me as I can be.
Yes.
And like, that was a great thing for 14 or 15-year-old me to have at that age.
Sure.
And this has continued to mean a lot to me. I have a shirt with the lips on it that say, don't dream it, be it across the top. I love it.
It's on the lips. We will talk about the lips in a bit.
I cannot wait to talk about the lips. I mean, that's how it starts, and it's amazing. Anyway, and the music is just really good, and it draws you in. And I just like, this movie showed me that there was more to life than Mormonism.
Sure.
And I was very grateful for that. So like, I've watched this movie a million times. I know all the words to all the songs. I probably, no joke, watched it 75 or 100 times. It is my warm hug movie.
Sure. Last night as I was watching it, I was like, I'm exhausted. I lost my wallet. I'm so angry.
I know,
and I was like,
I'm
but I gotta
sorry.
watch this movie. And I was like, well, I've seen it a gajillion times. Like, I'll fast forward because I know what's here or whatever. And then as I was watching, I was like, but I gotta watch the time where like I ended up just basically watching it because I was like, fuck, no, we're gonna fast forward through that, you bitch. Like, no, we're gonna watch.
You're definitely not going to fast forward it.
No.
I couldn't either. I have watched this a million times. I got up and made sure I started watching it by 7 so we could record at 9. And I could have just fast forwarded the songs because I know all the songs like by heart. And I sat through them because I love it.
I will say back half, a little more skippity aheady.
Oh, Paige, you've been on the record many times as saying the third act has pacing problems. And you're not wrong.
Huge pacing problem.
Yeah, you're not wrong. There's almost an act 4. It's too long for just a 3-act situation.
It's almost, and this is because, and we'll talk about the history of it a little bit, because it was a play first.
Yes.
This movie almost has 2 acts, not 3.
That's actually a better way to break it up because that's why it would feel like 4 instead of 5. But yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is a clear demarcation too. When people are like, oh my God, I love this movie, they're thinking of the first act.
They are, yeah. The last 45 probably minutes are way slower.
It is exactly 45.
Yeah.
The first act ends at almost exactly 49 minutes.
Yeah.
And there's a few minutes for credits, and the movie is 98 minutes long. and then the back 45. And we'll talk about it because that's part of where shadow casts start to diverge.
I can't wait to hear all that stuff because I've never seen a shadow cast do it.
Yeah.
So like, I can't wait to hear what they do. And honestly, I would love to, when I'm next in LA, I'd love to go to one of these.
Yeah. We have a shadow cast in LA that's been going for like 30 plus years, that they've been like forever.
Amazing. Well, I mean, Paige, do you want to just maybe go through this movie scene by scene?
Okay, before we even jump into it, the reason I bring up the runtime is I found a fun fact that blew my fucking mind.
Are you going to make us wait?
No, I'm going to tell you right now.
Okay, please. Thank you.
I'm going to tell you right now because it's important.
Yeah.
So, again, you heard me moments ago say this movie don't make no fucking sense, but the songs slap, and that's why people love it. And Tim Curry, because Tim Curry's he is in a different movie than most of the rest of the people in the movie, and thank God for it, because he is giving 250%.
Yes.
So, this was originally a stage show. And it was written by Richard O'Brien, who plays Riff Raff. I know he has some problematic opinions now. We'll talk about it a little bit later. Don't worry about it. I didn't forget about it. I have the article. It's fine. Okay.
He's a boomer with boomer opinions, pretty much.
Exactly.
Which is like sad but expected, unfortunately. Yeah.
It's real wild when people make this movie and then decide to limit what people can be with their gender.
I know, right?
But he wrote this originally as a play.
Well, and it was a musical originally. Like, he wrote the book, too. Like, he wrote the book and music, right?
Yes, but it did not immediately start that way. So, like...
Oh, I'm sure not. I'm sure it was an evolution, yeah.
So he was unemployed at the time and wanted to write kind of an homage to two things. One, horror movies of a certain era, basically 1930s to 1970s. Specifically Hammer horror films, which is why the movie looks the way it does. The movie, they did reuse some sets and some things in the movie, but when they went to do the movie, they deliberately tried to make it look like those horror movies.
Yes.
In ways that they could not do on the stage, which is really interesting. But
yeah.
Also, he was super into glam rock and early punk at the time.
I mean, there's a lot of that aesthetic in this, especially like the crazy punk of the 70s.
Well, and so I read so many articles last night because I like watched this. I was like, I need to read more. He commented at the time that he felt like he could be more fully himself in an androgynous glam rock persona. So in his mind, he's basing Dr. Frankenfurter on like David Bowie.
Yeah.
And Bowie is one that they get referenced a lot. So much so that Pierre LaRoche, who did Bowie's makeup, does all the makeup for the movie. Like
awesome.
They specifically hired him to like give us the Bowie.
And who doesn't love David Bowie? Like, I grew up loving David Bowie.
Right.
And like Star Child David Bowie. Like,
that's the era. That's exactly it.
Yes.
And so it's really interesting now that people are like, this movie is about LGBTQIA freedom. That doesn't come till later necessarily. Like when he was making it, they are using some of that. They are incorporating some of those references. But a lot of that comes from the later live performances. And we'll talk about that when we get to that in a bit.
I mean, there's tons of imagery in the movie, though. Like, it's in the movie.
Okay, but that's the movie that comes years later.
The first production of this was, as a musical, was in 73.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he was writing it for a long time before
I'm
that.
sure. I'm sure this took him a long time to write because the sequel isn't worth watching. He probably rushed that one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So as he's putting together the play, he partners with a very established director and producer that he had worked with in other plays in the West End. Same with, he had worked with Tim Curry.
They met on Hair. I actually know that because I had done some research a long time ago, but they met in a production of Hair in the late 60s. Yeah.
Right. And so almost all the people that are in this movie were in plays together and then end up in this play together. But the original play did not include two of the most famous songs in this movie and was only 40 minutes long. And gradually, over time, they added some of the literal most famous songs in this movie as filler to fill out and pad the runtime of the play because they needed to at least get it to an hour and they hadn't really thought it through that long. But then the play got really popular despite not really being that long and not being a fully fleshed out idea, kind of like a confluence of vibes.
That feels like avant-garde theater in the 70s, though. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
Like, I could totally see like a shitty version of this with hardly any good songs becoming popular because it's just weird and out there in the 70s, you know?
It's just weird, and people are just like rip shit on lewds, just mainlining the weirdness.
Just
like,
doing
yes,
all the drugs.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, that's exactly what was happening. And the show itself, because it would be in kind of smaller theaters because the live show required audience participation, which is something that will come back with the shadow screenings.
Yeah, well, I know for a fact that this version that goes to movie that premiered in 73, it premiered in a 67 or 68 seat theater that was like an attic theater above another theater. So like, and I get why the theater would be like, oh, you mean that you want us to put on the play that you've been doing for like 3 years that is not really anything? And he's like,
yes.
Yeah. And they're like, okay, just maybe in the roof. Go to the bell tower.
Yeah. Which is why people will try and compare Repo the Genetic Opera to this because it starts in a very similar way. But the end product is very different and not anywhere as good as this.
I honestly haven't seen Repo, but I would, but I haven't yet.
I can't avoid it if it gets chosen for a thing. But like, I have seen it and was very disappointed. Anyway, so yeah, like small theater. But it gets to be this like popular thing where like people go, they see it, and then they would party all night after the show.
Hell yeah.
Just like, you know, getting fucking wrecked. So it becomes this like hot, cool thing for hot, cool art people in the UK to do.
I love it.
And so Los Angeles hears about it and they're like, what now? And New York hears about it and they're like, what? We don't want to be left out. So they end up taking the show to both Broadway and Los Angeles in a full ass theater. Like a full Broadway, like a whole actual production. And at that point, they're like, we got to make this more than an hour. We got to like flesh this out.
Right.
So like they add a few things. One of the songs that was a filler song that they added to pad time, and I think they added it earlier than the Broadway run, but stories differ, was the Time Warp.
Oh, you mean like the best song from the movie?
The song. It's the song. That one, Hot Patootie went in and out where it was like a work in progress until they got to Los Angeles.
Hot Patootie's also one of my favorite songs.
Also one of my favorites as well. And I did think about calling Jeff for this episode because he had a blood feud with Meatloaf. But
did I ever tell you that I moved into an apartment that was like a privately owned apartment? And the day I showed up to meet this person who was going to let me into the apartment just to view it the first time, I ended up renting it. There was a ton of Meatloaf memorabilia in the apartment I was going to be like renting. And I was like, hey, I like Meatloaf. Yeah, like I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. But like, what is happening? And he goes, oh, sorry. I've been using this largely for storage. So I'm not going to tell you the name of the person who owned that place and probably still does. But he ghost wrote 2 albums with Meatloaf.
Oh, that doesn't surprise me at all.
And after that, Meatloaf would just send him stuff. And he was like, it wasn't always like gifts. It was like standees of him. Yes. And just like, send this to that guy. And he would get like a big box that had just like a 6-foot Meatloaf standee and had no place to put it. So we used it in that apartment. Anyway, I thought that was so funny that Meatloaf was that kind of guy.
That's incredible. And that's a much friendlier Meatloaf story.
Oh, I have also heard some nightmarish stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, we'll talk about it when we get to that song. It'll be fine.
Okay.
Anyway, when Richard O'Brien handed him Hot Patootie, he was like, don't worry if you can't get all the words right. No actor who's ever played Eddie has. Also, fun fact, Eddie and Dr. Scott used to be played by the same actor all the time on the stage.
Well, you can do that because they're never seen on screen together. Yeah.
And so like in the flip, it becomes more obvious that he's the nephew or whatever. But and Meatloaf did it that way on stage.
Yeah, he played
and was
Dr.
mad
Scott.
He didn't get to do it in the movie.
Yeah.
But he apparently got the song right first try and is the only person to ever immediately get it right first try.
But the dude's a legit musician. Like, I'm sure he's not actually playing the saxophone in that scene. Like, I bet it doesn't line up, but it looks convincing. You know, like he understands music enough to know how to make that look convincing, whereas most actors may not if they don't have a musical background.
Apparently, he got the list of the lyrics and was like, what did they have a problem with? And then just like did it perfect.
Yeah, he's Meatloaf. I mean, I don't mean that like he's great. I mean, like he's like a professional musician. Like those people who get to that level typically are very, very good.
Yeah. But when they got to do the movie, and it is shortly after the LA run, because they get to LA and LA is just like, we would love to steal this.
Yeah, we have to make this into a picture that will fail immediately on release and then become a cult hit. And it sounds like it succeeded just like the play did, where like it became like a party you would congregate around, right?
Yes and no, because it does take time. But we'll talk about that more towards the end, because I think once we get through the movie, it'll be easier to kind of
it'll make more sense.
Break down what happened. Yeah. But they then had to pad it out again because they couldn't just do like a 60-minute, like they needed a 90-minute version of it. At least. And so they added scenes to try and make the plot of the play make more sense.
Oh, I love that they tried, but they did not succeed.
And I was like, you mean there's a version of this that's shorter and makes less sense? And that's the version people saw and were like, gotta be a movie. That's insane to me. That this is the version that they're like, now this makes sense.
It sadly probably did make way more sense.
Well, yeah, because, you know, hey, if you get a chance to watch this rip shit on lewds, let me know if it makes more sense to you. It don't make sense on the screen, but the music is good, so we let it slide.
Yeah, the thing is, there is like enough plot that you're like, I guess this is happening, but your brain is filling in tons of gaps for you.
Yes. Yeah. And which is why when I texted you this morning, I was like, I did a deep dive on history, because if we actually just talk about what happened on the screen, this will be a 15-minute episode. Like there's nothing happens. It's a lot of songs that the most you can say about it is like, what a cool song.
Yeah. This movie is vibes in different scenes, and then it's over and you're sort of left changed as a person. But there's not much on screen to like dig into outside of the vibes.
Well, and yeah, so as I was like taking notes, I was like, wow, I really brain MacGyvered more of a plot to this movie. I was like, this has even less of a plot than I remember.
Yeah.
And that was the main criticism at the time, was that they were like, there's no plot in this movie.
To which Tim Curry responds, well, were you sober when you watched it? Because that's on you.
Yeah, no, you gotta be rip shit on lewds. Like, come on. If you're not 4 poppers deep, why are we even here?
Poppers, baby. Come on.
Anyway.
Yeah, we got to get into the lips, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, so the lips. This opens on a pair of disembodied lips singing the opening song, Science Fiction Double Feature,
baby.
I'll burn 2 fun facts. One, those are the lips of Patricia Quinn, who plays Magenta, but it is the voice of Richard O'Brien.
Yeah.
Now, the lips that are on the poster are the lips of a Playboy playmate, a completely different person, not in the movie, that they licensed her lips for the marketing.
No shit. Okay.
Yes.
I did not know that. They are noticeably different lips, though.
Yes, they are different lips. Now, these lips are important because the original plan for the movie that they chose not to do because they did not want to spend the time on it is for the movie to be in black and white.
Oh, wow.
Completely, until they get to the castle and Sweet Transvestite plays. And then Frankenfurter's lips would have been in color, that red, for the rest of the movie.
And just that?
Yes, just that. That was the original plan.
He invented the Sin City vibes.
Oh, we know.
That would have been cool as shit if it was just the lips. Although I also liked it if it, like, as the reveal happens when he takes the cape off with like the sun, like the thing you would hold under your chin to like make sure the sun hits your like
with the
neck
giant
while
collar.
you're sunbathing. It's like that huge collar. He takes that off and then everything goes into color like Pleasantville.
So
would have loved it.
That's a second version.
Oh,
that actually exists.
Oh, does it? Okay, cool.
That exists. The studio included it as an Easter egg on one of the DVD releases, which Susan Sarandon is still salty about because they did not get paid royalties on those DVDs.
Really?
Really? Yeah, it's pretty fucked up.
That is.
And she has a right to be salty, and good on you, Susan, for speaking out about it. She even said, she was like, that's close, but it's not what was intended, which was just the lips.
Yeah.
Now, if you see this at a midnight screening, the lips are very important because it is just lips on a screen, right?
Of course.
For 4 minutes and 40 seconds.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
Yeah. It's literally the runtime of the song, like the Science Fiction Double Feature. It's sung to you, and it's just, you get credits.
Yeah.
And as there aren't like lyrics necessarily, it pauses and shows more like credits, you know?
Yes. So I have seen this done 3 different ways at midnight screenings. I have seen it done as a drag performance, which most of your shadow cast is lip syncing, which is why a lot of drag queens get their start in Rocky Horror shadow cast, because it is literally what they will do later in their career. Famously, Trixie Mattel started out as Dr. Scott in a shadow cast.
I could see that because she's bald.
I could see, there's pictures online. You can find
Trixie,
it.
I love you.
Second, I have seen a striptease with no lip syncing, just a striptease.
Okay.
I have also seen a lip sync with a burlesque style striptease, which I think that and the drag version are my favorite. But usually your shadow cast has some sort of dance or sung performance during these credits while it's happening.
Okay. This song does a good job of like setting up that this is going to be a love letter to like 1930s to 1960s like science fiction movie, like B movies, right?
Right.
That's what this song is setting up for you.
And it is typically sung as a solo at the beginning of the play.
That's how it was when I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why they did it this way, as a way to incorporate that without having to shoot like a whole scene around it. Anyway, we open on a church after a wedding. Now, something to notice if you've never seen this before, most of the wedding attendees are the attendees at the convention/party later at the Frankenstein place, but also Dr. Frankenfurter, Columbia, Riff Raff, and Magenta are all there.
Yeah.
This is for two reasons. In the stage show, obviously, it's the same people because it's the chorus, no matter what.
Right.
In the movie, they only had a certain amount of extras and a certain amount of money. So, like, you know, it is what it is. But also, third, it is an attempt at trying to make a plot make sense, because when we get to the next scene, they will show shots of this almost to suggest that Brad and Janet were like not hunted, but like trapped, that they like saw them and went after them specifically.
Yeah.
It doesn't fully work. There's not enough on the screen to justify it, but I'll bring it up as we go along, the few places where they tried to make that through line. But it's your chorus. So essentially, they've gone to this wedding. Janet catches the bouquet and Brad sings our first song, Damn It, Janet, which is a bop and super fun. But in the background the entire time are the people that we are going to encounter later on.
Yes. Damn It, Janet is like, it sounds like he's mad at her, but he's like, I'm so in love with you.
Janet. I love you. With my weird talk singing.
I know. But like Bostwick is asked to do some crazy shit in this, and I feel like he delivers very well.
He's hilarious in it.
I also love, and this is something that I've been like critical of in other musicals, but I feel like it works in this because it's so campy, but like there's no auto-tune.
No, not at all.
And Bostwick is not the best singer in the world, right?
Yeah.
But it is their actual voices, you know? And sometimes they're sharp and sometimes they're flat, and we just like move through it. It's fine. It
still works because even when he's like sharp or flat, it's within character.
Yeah.
So sometimes he's cracking and he's nervous, or like, because later when he's singing Rose Tint My World, he's actually really good. And so I think it's intentional through most of it because he can sing. But I also think that he's like, Brad is a talk singer. Janet, I've been thinking. Like, it's very much in that character.
Yeah.
Susan Sarandon, oddly enough, did not think she could sing at all. Did not audition for the movie.
Really?
Showed up to say hi to Tim Curry because they had worked together on a few other plays. And they met her and were like, you'd be perfect for this. All the other Janets we have like tried to cast haven't been playing her funny, and she is very funny.
She is.
And we think you could do it. And she's like, well, I can't sing. And they're like, sing Happy Birthday. And she did. And they were like, you could sing. It's enough for this. And they cast her like on the spot.
That's great.
Yep. But then we cut to the criminologist.
Yes.
That is his name. He is basically a narrator. There is nothing else to let you know he's a criminologist. He really looks more like a rich guy in a library. Now, granted, the talk back dialogue at a midnight screening has already happened. It's every few minutes, right? But this is the biggest one where like they always scream at him for having no neck. He has no neck. But also he says his opening lines, I would like, if I may. And everyone screams, you may not. And he's like, to take you on a strange journey. All right. Like, but that's what it like. It is answering back.
The denial of the call of it all, Paige.
Yes. But like, there is enough weird pauses in this movie that like, you don't notice until you've been to a live screening and seen people yell back and be like, wow, nobody's talking over dialogue. Like, it is perfect. And then you watch it again after and you're like, why is everyone pausing so much? Anyway, the criminologist is like, it was an ordinary night. They're young, ordinary, healthy kids left Denton to visit Dr. Everett Scott, like previously high school science teacher and now friend to them both. But there's a storm and his spare doesn't have a lot of air. And they go driving on a night out they would never forget for a long time. As they're driving in the rain, they see motorcycles passing them. These are the guests of Dr. Furter.
I love that this scene tells us exactly what day and time this movie takes place.
Ooh, so Richard O'Brien hated that. It was his least favorite part. He fought the studio on it every step of the way because he wanted this to exist out of time completely.
Sure.
He did not want any time marker. So on record, because they do say here it's a November night, not an August night.
It would be August 8th, 1974. Yeah. A little after 9 p.m.
Right. So he is on record as saying that Brad recorded that broadcast and listens to it regularly. So this is some November after that happened because he is listening to Nixon's resignation.
I could see that with Brad. He's that kind of guy.
Yeah.
He sits in his car and cries to that soundtrack.
It is because they're listening to Nixon's resignation. That was put in post.
Of course.
And Richard O'Brien has been mad about it ever since. But they get to a dead end, which I do love that Janet's like, well, where are those motorcycles coming from then?
Yeah.
Because there's no turn or whatever. And it's because they're coming from the skies. We'll get into it later.
Yeah.
But they go to back up and they pop a tire. Intentional?
Who knows, Paige? Because the movie's definitely not going to tell us. Although Frankenfurter does sort of allude to the fact that they may have sabotaged them when he's doing his introduction song. But we don't know for sure.
We don't know for sure. But they're like, there's a castle down the road. We'll go and see if they have a phone. And there's a light over at the Frankenstein place.
Yeah.
Great song. This is one of my favorite songs.
I love it too.
I don't know. I think it's pretty.
It is pretty. It's also funny. There's a call and response sort of from them who have just like broken down and they're out in the rain and then riffraff in the tower of the place they're going.
Right.
But the funniest part of this to me is that they're singing for like the first verse of the song and then they arrive at the house and then they stand outside in the rain to finish the whole song. So they're like in front of the house waiting to go ring
completely
the bell.
soaked.
Yes, in the rain. It's so funny to me that they continue to stand there because they're watching Richard O'Brien sing sort of back to them. I don't know. It's very funny.
Yeah. Also, this house, notably a house that was used in many Hammer horror films. So like,
was it?
It is an existing set that had been used in a lot of the films that they were referencing.
Awesome.
That's part of why they used it. It was right next to a studio. So we cut to, or they pass a gate that says enter at your own risk.
Yes.
And we cut back to the criminologist who he has like a map of where they were supposed to go for Dr. Scott versus where they've ended up at Dr. Frankenfurter's castle. And he's like, they thought fortune had smiled upon them or had it because knock, 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 riffraff answers the door. And they're like, hey, do you have a phone? And he's just like, y'all whacked. And they're like, yes, it's raining. Yes.
That is how he sounds. I know everyone's already seen this, but like he does sound sort of nasally.
Hello.
And it's an interesting choice. But he is playing like
Igor.
Yeah, he is more or less playing Igor, right?
Werewolf, there wolf. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So they come inside. And I do love that Brad is like, don't be frightened, Janet. Look, it's just like a hunting lodge for rich weirdos. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, sure.
That's honestly how I felt walking into the Pacific Union Club in San Francisco.
And it looks exactly like this, right?
It looks a lot like this. It does. But it's beautiful. It really is.
Mm-hmm. But Janet is like, are you having a party? And he's like, you've arrived on a very special night. It's one of the master's affairs.
Yeah, the master's having one of his affairs.
Oh, lucky him. We're all lucky. Enter Magenta, screaming and sliding down a banister.
Which you'll come to expect from Magenta. She's crazy and unhinged the whole time. Half the time she seems like she's from another planet, and half the time she seems like a German nanny who's yelling at children. So what I'm saying, I guess, is no notes for Magenta.
No notes.
She was also one of the original cast members too. It was like Tim Curry, Richard O'Brien, Magenta, and Columbia, I think, were all in like the original play version.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about Columbia in just a little bit because her story's bonkers.
I'll be honest with you. 15-year-old Todd, when he first saw this, I was like, y'all can have Janet. Give me Columbia.
Fun fact about both Columbia and Magenta. Columbia, I think they did some hair dye, but Magenta, they didn't dye her hair red at all. And they would just spray their hair every day on set with like hair in a can that was red.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's why it's so dried, fried, and laid to the side.
Yeah.
But this begins the time warp. Now, before we get into the song, I do want to mention the clock that he dusts. He like opens up a grandfather clock with a skeleton inside and dusts it. That's a real skeleton.
What? Like a real human skeleton?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It belongs to the woman that commissioned that clock.
What? Okay.
Like it was her dying wish.
Is it her skeleton? Hang on.
Yes, it's her skeleton.
I love that she got to be turned into a clock. That's awesome.
Yeah, and she's in this movie, and then the clock and skeleton together were auctioned off a few years back. They sold for $35,000.
Oh, you can miss me with that haunted artifact, but that's cool.
That's gonna be super haunted, right?
It's cool that she got to like say, hey, I would love to be turned into a coffin clock. And they were like, okay.
Go for it.
And you know, I got to give them a coffin clock.
Yeah.
Not how I want to be interned or whatever, but like, good for you.
But thus the time warp starts, and they enter what a banner proclaims to be the annual Transylvania convention. This is Dr. Frankenfurter's party.
Yeah.
If you go see a midnight showing, there is a dress code. You are supposed to dress up. And people usually either go the lingerie route. It's a lot of people in corsets and fishnets.
Right.
Or they dress like attendees of the party. And I do always love to see attendees of the party at midnight showings. That's hilarious to me.
They're just wearing tuxes and like blue shirts with cummerbunds and shit. Like, yeah.
And dark glasses.
Awesome.
Now, one of the attendees is Richard O'Brien's wife at the time.
What?
Which I think was really interesting. Yeah, they did not stay married for long. He is a man who I think has engaged in many different romantic, sexual, gender scenarios in his lifetime.
He has some famous quote that says he's like, I can't remember the percentage, but he was like, I'm 70% male and 30% female or whatever.
Yes. They consider themselves third gender.
Okay.
Yes. But the time warp is primarily just directions for how to do a dance that's not that great, but boy, is that song catchy.
Oh, yeah.
And the lyrics, I think, are supposed to give you information about the story. They do not. It is kind of nonsense.
Yeah, no, I was going to say you've got the whole like story of the, well, you know, our car broke down or whatever, but that's not until Sweet Transvestite in a second. So like, it really is just like, here's how you do the time warp, guys.
Yes.
But the time warp is very important, Paige. That's how you send yourself to Transylvania or whatever.
Yes.
Or the planet Transsexual.
Right. It's the planet Transsexual. No, we'll get to it, Sweet Transvestite, when they tell us where it is.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if Transylvania or Transsexual is the planet.
But I also have to point out this. The first time we get the instructions to the dance, and it cuts to the criminologist.
Giving us the instructions.
Yes. The pause of him pulling down the thing.
Yes.
And then pointing at it. It's like the perfect comedic pause timing.
Yes.
Because it's a song. So there's like a beat to it. And then the beat just stops and he pulls it down. He goes, it's just a jump to the left. And then it cuts to them doing it. It's perfect.
And then it's to the right.
It's so funny.
I do love when you listen to it on the soundtrack, they've cut it so that it is still on beat.
Oh, really?
So even though you do still, and it is in the movie, it is too. You get just enough of a pause for him to pull that thing down and say it's a jump to the left. But it is on beat. So if you listen to the soundtrack, you hear his voice tell you it's just a jump to the left. And then a step and like
perfect. Yeah.
He at some points like put your hands on your hips. So like he's kind of in it too. And Janet faints and gets back up like 3 or 4 times during this song because she is scandalized. But then we get a tap break from Columbia. Let's talk about Columbia for a second.
Let's do it.
Columbia's character is confusing and we don't fully know why she's there.
Wait, Paige, stop everything.
Mm-hmm.
Can I tell you what I have always thought about Columbia?
Let's do it. Let's go into theories.
And then you tell me what is actually, because I think this will be a good sort of microcosm of how your brain, and maybe not everyone will see it the way I saw it, but how your brain sort of fills in the gaps in this movie. So here's how my brain filled in the Columbia gap, okay? Columbia was a groupie. That's how she said in the credits, right? So
Yep.
I think she's a groupie that came along with Eddie. And she was a groupie of Eddie, and she like sort of loved Eddie.
So in the movie, she and Eddie have a relationship. You're not wrong about that.
Yeah.
In the movie, in her speech later, she says she was a groupie of Dr. Frankenfurter and that she showed up and she and Frank had a relationship.
Yeah.
But then Frank brought Eddie in.
Yeah. I think she's the first sexual partner that Frankenfurter was experimenting with.
Right. But
Yes.
she meets Eddie when Frankenfurter brings Eddie in.
Right. Okay.
So they had no existing relationship before that. They meet because of Frankenfurter. And then Eddie disappears, we will find out, because of the deep freeze.
Well, and apparently half of his brain goes into Rocky.
Yes. That may have been because that scene, shooting Hot Patootie was very dangerous, and Meatloaf got a big gash across his head shooting it, and they may have had to just kind of work it in to the story. We'll talk about it later.
You see it in that scene. He does have a gash on his head.
Yeah, but that's all we know about Columbia is from that speech.
So I was close. I thought she just got to
close,
Dr.
yeah.
Frankenfurter through Eddie and not vice versa. But she clearly was into Eddie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the movie does not explain, but it is implied that Dr. Frankenfurter is very jealous, and that probably part of the reason Eddie was either put on the deep freeze or why he treats Columbia badly is because he was jealous of their relationship. There is not enough information in the movie to truly understand what's going on. It is just kind of added. Now, in this song, The Time Warp, she kind of tells her story of how she got there.
Yeah.
Where she basically says, I was walking down the street just to have a think when a snake of a guy gave me an evil wink. He shook me up. He took me by surprise. He had a big, I don't remember the lyrics, and the devil's eyes. He stared at me and I felt a change. Time meant nothing, never would again. She's talking about Dr. Frankenfurter.
Yeah.
In that.
So I've always read that as her meeting Eddie.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, like, it works for Dr. Frankenfurter too, because like he definitely gives us an evil eye many times as he breaks the fourth wall in this movie.
I love it.
Yeah, me too. No notes.
But then she has a tap interlude. Now, the actress playing Columbia is a woman known by the moniker Little Nell. And the reason she got that name is because her father was a famous columnist back in the day in their home of Australia, where he would write about kind of daily slice of life things about his family and referred to her as Little Nell.
What?
So she kind of got that nickname. And she then eventually moves to the UK and was busking as a teenager, tap dancing on the streets. And they pulled her off the streets for the stage play.
Are you serious? I love everything about this. That's amazing.
I know. This is one of the things that I knew I was going to rabbit hole on last night when I was watching this, because her name comes up in the credits and it's like Little Nell. And I'm like, who is Little Nell? Like, why is it Little Nell? There must be a reason for that nickname.
So interesting. Sorry. That's awesome.
And she is in the sequel and a handful of other things, but not a ton. But I believe has performed live for a bunch of other things. It just doesn't have as much film work.
That's such a cool story. I love that.
Yep. Little Nell. Now, the song ends and everyone is like passed out on the floor. Now, when you do see this in a midnight showing, everyone gets up and does the time warp. You are required to do the time warp.
You're already in costume. Why not?
Yeah, of course. But I do love when Susan Sarandon's like, Brad, say something. And he's just like, say, do you guys know how to Madison?
After that, like, she's so disappointed that the thing he said was, maybe we should dance more. Like, and not, where's your fucking phone? Like,
where's your phone? What is going on?
Yeah.
Because she wants to get out. She's like, please, can we just go? And he's like, no, like, well, wait. And there's a phone. And she's like, it's not the Junior Chamber of Commerce, Brad. And they're backing up to the elevator in this house.
Yeah, and he very much is like, what's going to happen? You're fine. You're safe. I'm with you to protect you.
Yes.
And then that's when she sees Tim Curry turn around as Doc, and I love it. Because she screams. She's like, what? Yeah.
She screams and faints. Thus begins one of my other favorite songs. This song fucking slaps.
This song broke my brain when I first saw it. I love it.
The nomenclature has changed.
Yes.
I understand. But I do think that this became, and this song in particular, which I did see done fantastically at karaoke the other night, and we screamed at that man, Enjoy.
I would do this song at karaoke in a heartbeat.
Oh, of course. And like, if you get the right crowd of people that like know the callbacks, it's worth it.
Yeah, you do need the right crowd. You're right. Like, I'm not going to do this at a work function, but like if I was out in LA and we were doing a live show and like we did that karaoke afterwards, I'd do this for that show.
This is going to sound crazy. I think you could do this at one of my work functions for my day job. But our office do be in LA. So.
Yeah, so your office is in LA. My corporate office is in Florida.
Yeah, no.
Different vibes.
Different vibes. But I do think despite the outdated nomenclature, this song has helped a lot of people find themselves in this movie.
Yeah.
Which is why on Twitter a few weeks ago when people are like, is this movie problematic? A bunch of people were like, no, shut up. I thought that was a real fun. But again, like I said, a bunch of drag queens get their start doing shadow casts. Like, this does become very important in the community. And we will talk about it more after.
But this is one of those things that's the word that was common at the time, and it wasn't like a derogatory thing. It was like...
And it's not used derogatorily in this at all. It is an identifier.
No, it's celebrated.
Yes, it is celebrated.
Yeah. So like, I get why people would ask. I also get why I'm sure people from the community were like, no, not at all.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
It's like people, I don't know, if you look back in history, use words that are now mean something derogatory, but at the time that was like the medical diagnosis for a cognitive disability. It's like that sort of a thing.
And I think in part of people's frustration with the term is because people in the past use it as a catch-all.
Yeah.
And it's really not a catch-all. It refers to cross-dressing in particular, but that may be completely different than your gender identity. That's your gender presentation. Those are two different things. And I think a lot of the glam rock of this movie is rooted in androgyny specifically, where there is a kind of a varied presentation for a lot of characters, not just Frank. And so it's kind of like, choose your own adventure of what you want to be, because that is your choice to do so. And then whatever your identity is your own business, but feel free to present as you want.
Yeah.
It's also notable, but fan casts are typically gender neutral, meaning any person can play any character as long as they have the right costume.
Yeah.
Which I think is great. Like, I've seen more Lady Brads than I have seen other Brads.
I've seen Dude Columbias, and I'm like, hell yeah. Because you can tell right away, because they've got like the sparkly hot pants. They've got the golden like top hat that's also
it's a very
sparkly.
distinct costume.
So like, you're not like, oh, I wonder if that's a member of the chorus or whatever. You're like, holy shit, that's a Columbia hymn, and I'm here for it.
Well, and they try to get the costumes very, very close. I read an interview with the costume designer that was very, very interesting, where she's like, I was kind of bumbling my way through these costumes with no money, and it is wild to see so many people over the years replicate them for the fan casts.
Yeah.
And I think people automatically think of Frank as a drag queen, and that's not entirely accurate. It's not inaccurate either, though. It's two different sides of a similar coin.
I honestly have never tried to label it. Like, I don't...
You shouldn't try to label it. That's the point.
Yeah, like, I don't really care. It is just a person who's wearing, like, lingerie, more or less.
Yes. It is a person with androgynous or heightened gender representation.
Yes. I mean, they do refer to themselves in the Sweet Transvestite song, I'm just a sweet transvestite from Transsexual Transylvania. So like, as in my mind, I was just like, oh, that's a transvestite, because that's the way
that's how they identify,
they describe themselves or whatever. But I never tried to like drill it down any further than that, because I don't care largely.
Well, and frankly, you shouldn't. That's kind of the point of the movie, is that it's like, that when they're singing Don't Dream It, Be It, it's literally like anything.
Yeah, that's the way I took it. I wasn't like, when I saw that, I wasn't like, oh, I can also wear lingerie. That's not something that I wanted to do.
Right.
But I was a very like sheltered Mormon child. And there were things that I had dreams about outside of that I was like, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to pursue what I want in my life. And so like, I get why that became a mantra for people of all different walks, you know?
Yeah.
Spark something uncommon this holiday with just the right gift from Uncommon Goods. If you haven't finished your holiday shopping yet, or like me, have yet to begin, I've got a secret source for incredible original gifts, and that's Uncommon Goods. They've got unique, hand-picked gifts for everyone on your list, all in one spot. Gifts that spark joy, wonder, delight, and that's exactly what I wanted type feeling. You know what I'm saying? Somehow they know exactly the perfect gift for every single person you know. So skip the gifts that scream last minute and find something truly original at uncommongoods.com. Here are some of my favorite things that I found on this site, and I hope Natalie's listening. So, okay, guys, there's this cool throwback speaker with Bluetooth radio that I thought was awesome because it looks like an old speaker, from back in the day, from 1920s back in the day. It looks really cool. I'm into it. Also, I'm a workaholic, so they also had this really cool adjustable laptop desk that I could use. So I could always be working. Anyway, so those are some great things you could get me. I'm just saying, whatever. It's clear when I was going through their site just now that Uncommon Goods looks for products that are high quality, unique, often handmade, or made in the US. They have the most meaningful, out-of-the-ordinary gifts anywhere. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/horrorvirgin. That's uncommongoods.com/horrorvirgin to get 15% off. Don't miss out on this amazing limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're out of the ordinary.
Audible's best of 2024 picks are here. Discover the year's top audiobooks, podcasts, and originals in all your favorite genres. From memoirs and sci-fi to mysteries and thrillers, Audible's curated list in every category is the best way to hear 2024's best in audio entertainment. Like a stunning new full-cast production of George Orwell's 1984. Heartfelt memoirs like Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's Lovely One. The year's best fiction like The Women by Kristen Hanna. And Percival Everett's brilliantly subversive James. Audible. There's more to imagine when you listen. Go to audible.com/imagine and discover all the year's best waiting for you.
Anyway, we get Sweet Transvestite. Amazing song. One of the biggest songs people remember from this movie.
It's my favorite. I think it is the best character introduction in any musical I've ever seen.
Agreed.
And there are a lot of great character introductions through song, but this is, I think, the best.
Yeah, this one's great.
Because it's so powerful. The dude comes in, commands a room full of people, literally captivates them, breaks the fourth wall.
Yeah.
I love the way that Tim Curry plays it. It's so confident. It's sexy.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
It's great.
But we also have to talk about the anticipation of it all. That pause literally makes you lean in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great performance.
Well, and a lot of that enhanced by Pierre LaRoche's makeup to make his eyes look that much bigger on his face.
Oh, yeah.
And Tim Curry already has pretty buggy eyes, but it makes them look even larger so that as he expresses with them, it is more dramatic. They also overdraw his lips so that expression, multiple times when he's kind of giving people the stink eye, those lips really talk more than even he is talking.
Yeah, he's amazing.
So
I do want to say, this is the second time I had seen Tim Curry on the screen.
What was the first?
The first time was Home Alone 2.
Jesus.
So
okay.
I was like, oh, wow, this guy has range.
I had seen him in Muppet Treasure Island before this.
Oh, I do love him in that movie, too. Very different vibe. Obviously, it's a Muppet movie, but yeah.
Yes.
The dude is amazing, and thankfully still with us, although sadly he can't perform much anymore.
No, although he recently did an appearance, and I think because he has been in occupational therapy and a few other things since his stroke.
Yeah.
But was able to actually go and do an appearance, which was rare, which I think thankfully means that he is maybe doing a little bit better than he has been, which is good.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, after the song, they take their clothes immediately and they're like, you're invited up to the lab, but we're going to take your clothes. And Brad is fully chubbed up.
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's post high school. He's probably maybe 20,
Yeah.
He's around a bunch of not naked, but scantily clad. His girlfriend's a little scantily clad at this point. He's chubbed up. He's definitely chubbed up.
Yeah, he's chubbed up. And they comment on it a couple times. They're like, oh, do it slower.
Oh, it's such a good job. I don't want to rush it, I think is what she says.
That's what it is. It's such a good job. I don't want to rush it.
Something like that. And I do love that Columbia's collecting their clothes as Magenta's throwing them on her arm. Mm-hmm. And they're she's like, it's such an honor to be invited up to the lab. And she's like, I've seen it. And she just throws their clothes and is out.
She's like, some people would kill for the pleasure.
Yes.
Would you? No, I've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She is a wild card every time she speaks, and I love it.
Love it. They get into the elevator. They drop the champagne bottle almost to like christen it like a voyage.
Well, that's riffraff because he's standing by the elevator. He's pouring himself like a pretty large glass of champagne, and then he drops it, gets in, and starts the elevator, and then starts drinking. And that's when I think it's Susan Sarandon is like, "Are one of you the doctor's wife?" And riffraff is like, "The doctor has not yet been married, and I don't think he ever will."
Yeah. But they arrive at the theater, or an operating theater, I should say. It's the lab.
Yes.
It's very reminiscent of a spa. Lots of pink tile, Roman columns, genuine Corinthian columns.
But there's like a ramp around the outside of it that leads to like a viewing platform and then back down. And the chorus, or like the attendees of this party, are all up there looking down on them as they enter from the elevator. And it's just like Dr. Frankenfurter wearing his like green lab coat. And he has on his lab coat
a pink triangle.
Yeah, that pink triangle, but turned up, which is the inverse of the way the Nazis used it in World War II to identify homosexual men. So like, I love that they have that in this. This is one of the, I think, first inclusions of imagery along this line in the movie.
It is, but there are also comments and lines where it's Rocky is your triumph of will.
Yeah.
Is what one of them says, referring to the Nazi film, The Triumph of the Will.
Yeah.
And referring to the fact that Rocky is blonde hair, blue-eyed, muscular.
Exactly.
All of it.
He is the Ubermensch. He has the Charles Atlas seal of approval page.
But meant to almost kind of throw it in Frankenfurter's face a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially while wearing that symbol.
Yeah.
It is done intentionally.
Which that would have been one of the first times that was seen in America, because that symbol, the triangle, was I did a deep dive on this morning.
Yeah.
It was originally used in like the early 70s, probably when this was being like performed on the stage.
Very early.
Yeah,
yes.
Like it was a way for German homosexuals to like take it back. And it was something that they started in Germany that they sort of moved into pop culture around the world because of this movie and other people, using it for that purpose of like reclaiming it. But it didn't get here until ACT UP started using it during the AIDS fight, which was like early-ish 80s, which if you want to see a sad but amazing documentary on ACT UP and all of that stuff, watch How to Survive a Plague if you want to cry for days. It's so good, though. It's great.
I would say double feature that with Paris is Burning.
Jesus Christ.
If you also want to cry.
Yeah, if you want to cry for
learn about things.
Yeah. I mean, but they both are amazing.
If you want to hate the Reagans.
I mean, yeah.
Watch How to Survive a Plague and Paris is Burning.
A lot of my rage does come from that and just the general economy. But I think a better double feature is this and the non-musical version of this, which is clearly Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, I would say this and Young Frankenstein, I think, is a great double feature.
Oh yeah, Richard O'Brien reprising the role. Yeah, absolutely.
Not reprising.
No, I know.
Completely different.
It's very much an homage to that, though. I think Richard O'Brien. Wait,
yes.
Which movie came first? I actually don't know which was first, Young Frankenstein or this.
Young Frankenstein beats it by, I think, a year, if not the same year. I'm double checking. Yeah, no, Young Frankenstein beat it by a year.
Good for you, Mel Brooks. God, I love Mel Brooks.
But I feel like this is really fascinating to me. And I think we're seeing a version of this now with nostalgia for the 80s and 90s of like people who grew up of an era and watching media of that era, making films and art about how that nostalgia speaks to them, but through the lens and through the eye of each individual artist. So this is Richard O'Brien's one, and then Mel Brooks's one is Young Frankenstein. And they're two very different movies meant to do a lot of the same stuff, which I think is really interesting.
It is really interesting. They also both play to their strengths. Like, I think Richard O'Brien could write some very catchy but nonsensical songs. And Mel Brooks had probably some of the best comedic chops of the time.
Yeah, and was a few movies deep and had a stable of talent that he could call upon for that movie. Yes. So Magenta and Columbia start to prepare the tank. We'll talk about the tank a little bit more in just a second. And Dr. Frankenfurter is like, you assist, I'll entertain. And he comes over and immediately is flirting with both Brad and Janet.
Yeah.
And what charming underclothes. Put on these lab coats so you don't feel so vulnerable.
Yeah, and then all the chorus like giggles. I love it.
And he's like, we don't often receive visitors or offer them hospitality. He's like, I just wanted to use your phone. And he's like, I love how forceful you are, Brad. So dominant.
Well, because he does yell at him.
Yes. Got any tattoos? No? How about you? And they're like, everything is ready. He's like, all right. Okay. Excuse me. Now, one of the things that happens at midnight showings during this scene, which I love, is that people bring rubber gloves and snap the gloves
When he's
along
doing
with
his
him
speech?
snapping them
Yes.
on the scene.
I do love that he delivers a speech that talks about how he discovered the secret of life. And then he sort of talks a little bit in gibberish about how he discovered it by accident. And like,
Right.
Magenta and Columbia come over. They're like, by accident. And then like, I think just because of the cadence he's talking in, and maybe because Janet's not the brightest person, when he's done, she claps, even though he didn't really say anything.
He said nothing.
Yeah.
And she's like, I also love that slightly later, Janet flip-flops like crazy. We'll get to it in just a second. But Janet, in this scene, I think is where we start to see the switch in Janet. But we'll get to it in just a sec.
Yeah.
But he pulls the sheet off the tank, and there is a mummy floating in it. And he's like, throw open the switches.
Dial up the sonic oscillators.
And a thing comes down from the ceiling, and then he puts colors into the tank. Now, burning a fun fact, the colors are in a particular order.
Of course.
But not necessarily the order that they end up in the tank, but they just wanted him to do it a certain way. So in that scene off screen, they're yelling colors at him for him to do. And at one point you could tell he couldn't quite hear them and was confused and like pauses for a second and then does it. But yeah, they apparently yelled for a very specific color order that does not impact the movie at all.
Well, it doesn't impact the flag either, because it's not like in the layers of the LGBTQ plus flag.
Which was not necessarily the flag yet at the time, or at least that was not widely popularized as the flag.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, I would be surprised if this movie was the genesis of that, but I wouldn't be surprised because of the triangle also being a relatively new sort of thing they were reclaiming, also showing up in this. I wouldn't be surprised if they worked it into this because it was starting to be used somewhere.
No, it had not even been invented yet.
What? Really?
Yes, the original
Awesome.
pride flag was and just the rainbow one, not the current one that incorporates a lot of other things. But the original rainbow one was designed by Gilbert Baker and debuted at the San Francisco Gay Freedom Day Parade, which has become the Pride Parade, on June 25th, 1978. So 3 years after this movie. But it was created at the request of Harvey Milk, the San Francisco city supervisor and first openly gay person elected to office in California.
And was assassinated for his civic duty.
Yes. So Gilbert Baker has said that they were inspired by the diversity of a Patti Smith concert crowd, which he saw, quote, as a rainbow of humanity. And each of the colors means something. So hot pink, sex; red, life; orange, healing; yellow, sunlight; green, nature; turquoise, magic and art; indigo, serenity; and violet, spirit. The original flag had 8 colors. Also, the original designer, Gilbert Baker, was known to perform as a drag queen. But as far as I know, no association with the movie, so this is a coincidence.
That's wild.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes, that is insane. I have always assumed that's why they did that.
Sure. Well, that's because a lot of people assume that. But this is what I'm saying, where I'm like, we interpret a lot of what we see in this movie as specifically tied to the LGBTQIA community because they ultimately embrace this movie.
Yeah.
But a lot of the things that we interpret as, oh, that's a clear symbol, are not. The triangle is one. They have talked about that openly, but again, that was one that was not super prominent at the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the rainbow, no, that coincidence.
That's so cool.
Isn't that wild? Yeah.
I wonder if there was some, and I don't know, but I wonder if it sort of like incepted the idea of doing a flag like this for that group of people. I don't know. That's interesting.
Here's what I will say, that by 1978, this movie did have midnight screenings across the country, but not widely spread enough for that to have impacted the community.
Well, I mean, but did Gilbert Baker go see a midnight showing and like...
It's oddly enough kind of unlikely because he was in San Francisco and they didn't start getting midnight showings until 78. So like, it's possible that maybe he saw one that year and did it.
It sort of like inspired it or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not making that assertion because I'm just wondering. I have no idea.
He says it's the Patti Smith thing. So I'm going to go with that.
I mean, yeah, you should, because that's what the guy said. Yeah. Okay.
So I think this might be a coincidence.
I mean, it sounds like it is. Yeah.
But yeah.
That's so interesting, though. Okay. It's like a parallel thinking sort of thing, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do think so. And it's also one of those things that I think later on, as this built up steam in that community, it becomes one of those folded in things of people being like, oh, clearly that's a thing. And it's like, probably wasn't, but like.
I mean, it becomes folded in because it looks almost the same, you know? Like, I understand why you would confuse that as someone who has confused it every day of my life until today.
Well, and you got to remember that tank was one of the set pieces that they had used on stage, which means that they'd been doing it for years before then.
Oh, yeah.
Like way longer. Yeah. So
Wild.
I know. But Rocky climbs out of the tank and unwraps himself and gets his song, The Sword of Damocles, where he basically holds on to the color spurt thing. He runs around the room. He's all over the place.
This is the, like, oh, I've just been born, and man, I'm not a huge fan of the situation I've been born into.
Sure,
Like, that's the vibe of the song. And, like, Dr. Frankenfurter is, like, chasing him around as he's, like, trying to get away. But, yeah.
I do love that when he finally, like, finishes his song, and Frank is like, that's no way to behave on your first day out. And he's like, oh, and he's like, but I'll forgive you. And he like hits the bars of the tank like a monkey.
Well, he doesn't know how to clap. And also he is a throwback. And I think they're referencing King Kong a little bit. Because later in the movie,
because they reference it later.
Yeah, I think this is also part of it, him smacking those bars. But I mean, he also doesn't know how to clap yet because he's just out, Paige.
He's a baby.
Yeah.
I do love that. Like, this is where Riff Raff and Magenta are like, he's a triumph of your will. And then they get to Columbia and she's like, he's okay.
Which I like. I like the understated, like, compliment, like, yeah, it's great, or whatever. Like, she says it very much like, who gives a shit? Right. And he looks at her like he's going to stab her in the face.
Well, and then he drags Rocky over to Brad and Janet and was like, what do you think? And Janet's like, I don't like too many muscles. And I think she's saying that because Brad is there.
Oh, she looks at Brad first. Like, if Brad wasn't there, she would have been like, he's hot as fuck and I would not mind smashing later.
Yes. But this is where he's like, well, I didn't make him for you.
I love that line.
And we go into the Charles Atlas Seal of Approval, a.k.a. I can make you a man. In just 7 days, I can make you a man.
This is one of my favorite songs because
it's a fun one.
Man, it is so, like, campy. Like, Dr. Frankenfurter wheels out a pommel horse and humps it, more or less. But, like...
Oh, yeah. I'd like to see Steve from the Olympics do that.
I gotta be honest with you. If a guy who was in the Olympics, if they did... Holy shit. I'm sorry. If you, like, knew... I don't know if they do this in pommel horse. I think in some events you get, like, 2 or 3 goes at it and your best score counts.
Right.
So let's just say you fucking nail your first performance. You're never going to do better than that. That second performance, I want to see a shot for shot redo of this and just see what the judges score it.
Just to be curious.
It's great. But it's like Paige was saying, in just 7 days, I can make you a man. He'll look like this, like he's a gorgeous thing. He's like talking to the chorus, like, here is my scientific triumph. And it seems like, at least in the pieces I put together in my brain, because none of this is on screen, he is an effluent member of that society, and they sent him here to do some science experiments, and he is, like, sort of reporting back to them through in this moment. I don't know that that's the case, but that's the vibe, right?
Yeah, I have always assumed that as well. Almost in the way of, like, I don't know if you watch What We Do in the Shadows, the TV show.
I've seen the whole first season, and I just haven't had the time to go back and watch the rest, and I really loved it. I haven't had time. It is
fucking great, and they have a storyline like this right now where they have, like, a Frankenstein. But they were sent to Staten Island to take over America.
Real bartender Jackie Daytona or whatever his name is.
Jackie Daytona, real human bartender. But they were sent to take over America. And like at least once a season, they run into another vampire. They're like, I haven't seen you in 200 years. How's it going taking over America? And they're just like, well, we have taken over this block and 2 houses on this street. And they're just like, you've been here for 200 years. And they're unimpressed with their progress.
Yeah, Prescott Bush did it in pretty much just a generation.
Right?
Guys, that's a business plot joke that, like, none of y'all are going to get. But if you get it, you know the truth.
I knew it.
You know what I'm saying?
But this is how I kind of view it, of like the Transylvanian conclave of light or whatever sent Frankenfurter here for research.
Yes.
And then they showed up and they're like, this is what you did with our money?
Right.
you made a man specifically for you to bone, because that is 100% what he did.
He made 2 different men for him to bone. I guess he didn't make Eddie.
Yeah, he didn't make Eddie.
Yeah, he just took half of Eddie's brain to make Rocky. And sadly, he took the dumb half.
Yeah.
You know how you only use like 10% of your brain? He scooped out none of the 10% that actually Eddie had access to use.
Right, and then use the rest, like just filled in the other half for both of them with meatloaf.
Exactly. Actual meatloaf, though.
Actual meatloaf.
And that's where the name comes from, guys. I don't know if you know this. Actual fake fun fact.
Oh, yeah.
Meatloaf goes by Meatloaf because the other half of his brain that's not in Eddie's brain is actual Meatloaf.
There is a story about how Meatloaf got his name.
I assumed it was like he was reclaiming something that people called him in his youth.
I believe so.
Because he is a chubbier guy.
Yes. It's like how I have a chain that says Ham Beast.
Yes, Paige. It is a reclamation, if you will.
Yeah. What I do have about the nickname is he got it in 7th grade after stepping on a football coach's foot. There's multiple stories, but after stepping on a football coach's foot, the coach yelled, "Get off my foot, you hunk of meatloaf." And the next day, a piece of paper with meatloaf was taped to his locker. And he has said that classmates called him Meatloaf because of his weight and initials, because his actual name is Marvin Lee Aday.
Okay.
So ML Aday, Meatloaf Aday. So he did legally change it in 1984 to Michael Lee Aday, but he was known by his nickname Meat.
I know this for a fact because of the guy I rented that apartment from who knew Meatloaf personally, worked with Meatloaf, that when he would call the guy who ghostwrote the album for him,
yes,
he would answer the phone and he'd be like, "Hey, this is," whatever the guy's name was. Meatloaf would be like, "Hey, this is Meat." So he referred to himself as just Meat.
Meat.
Like, I laughed so hard when he told me that. And not like, that's so dumb. I was just like, oh my God, I love that. Like, that is how I would do it. Like, I love it.
Yeah. But he is also, fun fact, or was, 5'2", and a little heavier than me, or at least in 7th grade when he got the nickname. So it was basically like me walking around. And that's why I have a chain that says Ham Beast.
I do want to point out that he goes by Meatloaf in this film.
Yes.
And his first album, Bad Outta Hell, didn't come out until 2 years after this comes out. So he was clearly going by that professionally even.
Yeah. Well, that's like, I got the nickname Rampage as a freshman in college.
Probably by those 2 seniors.
No, actually. It was a frat guy gave me the nickname. A frat guy that I am still very good friends with. I am his son's godparent.
Oh, nice.
But so Instagram didn't exist yet. And when Instagram came out, somebody had already taken @Paige Wesley.
Yeah.
And so I put down @Rampage Wesley because I was still in college at the time.
That damn CEO.
That damn CEO, but I got her now. I'm like the first 3 pages of Google. She can suck my dick. So I had the Instagram, Rampage Wesley. And when I started roast battling, they would tag on Instagram for flyers.
Yeah.
And so they just started using it for roast battle. So like a lot of people think that they're like, oh, she got that nickname at roast battle. It's like, no, I got that nickname in college and it was just easier to reprint the tag, I think. So that's why I believe Meatloaf got it in probably 7th grade.
I got my nickname in a sort of similar way. Like it was something that other people called me, and then I started using it on Twitch.
Right.
And people thought I just gave myself that name, but it was like Todd Awesome was my Twitch handle, right?
Right.
But I got that at work because I was the most fun trainer at work. So like they bought me a nameplate that said Dr. Awesome. And so that was on my desk at work. I think I might still have the nameplate they bought me. But yeah, it was great. Everyone thought I was a douche because of it.
I also am realizing I don't have a Rampage chain. I don't know why I love wearing crazy chains. It's a phase I'm in right now. But I have one that says Hot and Heavy, one that says Plump, one that says Ham Beast, which is the one I wear probably most often. And then I got one for next roast battle season because I'm playing for the Bay Area team.
Nice.
That just says Bay Shit.
Oh.
And I love it.
Paige, you're going off the rails on these crazy chains.
Yes, I am indeed.
I'll say, just to refocus us back on the movie, the I Can Make You a Man song is so great that they take a break and come back to it. And that break is a full-ass other song, and that's Hot Patootie.
Yes.
Which is a
great song.
Yes, it's great. And this is where Meatloaf literally comes out of the freezer on his motorcycle and is like riding through the audience.
And has a crazy head injury.
Yes. That he probably got falling trying to do that last time or something, you know?
Yes.
But it's his like song where he's singing about like whatever happened to Saturday night. And it's talking about like going and making out with his girl at the hot like Lover's Lane spot. And he has a sax solo. It's great. The song slaps.
Well, it's very much a song about like things used to be cool in the old days, which does not really fit in this at all. But like, it's a good song.
I feel like the only way it fits in is that it's sort of a throwback to like the vibe of those like 1960s horror movie, like B movies that are like back in the day, things were great, you know?
Things were great.
But that is very much what this is, I think, paying homage to.
Yes. And you remember when they had that Broadway musical with all the Spider-Men that kept falling? Too many dead Spider-Men?
People, yeah, they died. A few died. Or at least one.
Which they mocked hilariously in Only Murders, but also where it was just like not safe on set. That's this. Like this scene hurt more stuntmen and cast members than like any other scene in the movie.
That does not surprise me at all.
Yeah, it was not good. But then we get a reprise of I Can Make You a Man. This is where Janet completely changes her tune and is like, I'm a muscle fan, when previous she had not said it.
Let me pause you right there, because if you watch Tim Curry as he gets back into that section where she steals his line, he's like throwing his head back so aggressively, like dude's in it and walking towards, I'm going to say, his child bride, because they get married right after this. I get that Rocky's like a full-ass adult with Eddie's brain, but like, you know, it's his first day out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's a weird movie, okay?
Yes, it is a weird movie. He goes, if you watch this frame by frame page, he goes to deliver that line. Like Tim Curry knows, the actor Tim Curry knows he's going to get that line stolen from him. But he starts to sing it. And then as she steals the line, I'm a muscle fan, he looks directly at the barrel of the camera for like half a second and then turns around. And you can see he is so fucking mad that she stole that line from him. It is such a wild performance. And if you can pause it when he's looking down the barrel in that moment, oh, it's so funny. I love it so much.
It is great.
It's so great.
But he basically takes Rocky into a bridal suite and the curtains close.
And they play the ba 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 ba. Yeah, the whole thing, right? Yeah.
And this is typically where I stop watching the movie.
Yeah, this is the end of like, what if it's 2 acts? That's the close of Act 1.
This is the end of Act 1.
Yes.
Yes, and it is right around 49 minutes.
Yeah.
But this is almost exactly half, and we reveal that they take Brad and Janet to their respective individual rooms. They are absolutely the same room. One has different lights. And they're watching them on closed circuit TV.
Yes.
Why? Who's to say? None of this makes sense. This is where any logic in this movie unravels very, very fast.
Well, I mean, we get to, in a second, we get Magenta and Columbia, who are singing along with Susan Sarandon, sort of. They're acting like as the chorus.
That's like 4 scenes from now.
I know, but they're still watching it like they're at like a sleepover.
On TV.
Watching a TV show. It is crazy, and it defies all logic, really.
It defies all logic. Later, they're going to have dinner at like midnight. But anyway, we cut to Janet in shadow, sleeping, and it seems like Brad has come in to get into bed with her.
And it is Brad's voice initially, right?
Yes.
Until the reveal, then it definitely is Tim Curry's voice, obviously.
Right.
But man, I loved this reveal, and I love the way this scene is mirrored with the Brad scene.
Yeah, because it's the exact same dialogue, yes.
It's almost word for word. Like the only things that are changed out are the character names because, you know, we can't tell Brad is what she's saying here or whatever.
Right.
Or I was saving myself for Brad or whatever it is. But obviously that's switched out when Brad's saying the line. But yeah, it's great.
Yes. And I will say, because I was like, as I was watching this last night, I was like, I don't remember how consensual these are. And I will say that at least he's lying to them initially, but then he's like, it's me. You still in? And they're like, well, if you don't tell the other person.
Which is pretty much what it is. Because I think it's pretty heavily implied that Susan Sarandon has sex with him.
Yes.
And it's heavily implied that at least Brad gets head.
Yes, at least. Yeah.
At least, you know.
They're sharing a cigarette later.
I know. They definitely at least did that. It could have that could have been a preamble to something, but we see that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
But we then cut to Rocky is asleep and Riff Raff and Magenta scare him with fire and he ends up running away.
Dude, Riff Raff with the candelabra, like just shaking it in his face. And those, like, those are lit candles. So, like, wax is also sort of spilling out. And Rocky, breaks the golden chains that he's chained up with and runs down climbs down the elevator shaft in, again, I'm assuming an homage to King Kong.
Yes.
While he's running down or climbing down the elevator shaft, Riff Raff takes one of the lit candles and throws it at him like he's trying to stab him with it like a dagger.
Yes.
And that to me makes me laugh every time.
But he takes off. Meanwhile, Frankenfurter does the same thing to Brad that he just did to Janet, although as it's happening, Riff Raff comes in on the TV in the bedroom and is like, Master, Rocky is running outside. Magenta has released the dogs. And Frankenfurter is like, okay, fine. I just got to finish up here. And like full mouth. And he's just like, coming. Yeah. And it's heavily implied that fellatio happens.
Oh, I think fellatio commences in the scene for sure. It may be more than that, but it's at least that.
At least that. Meanwhile, Susan Sarandon gets in the elevator. She's like, Brad, how could I have done this to you? Oh, no. I think in theory, she's going to try to apologize.
Yes.
Oh, wait. First, we do get a shot of Rocky running outside from the dogs.
Yes.
And the fact that he is literally instantly back inside in the next scene is never explained, but that's fine.
Yes. Also not wet. And I think it was raining outside earlier, if you remember. But anyway, when Susan Sarandon or Janet is like in the elevator and she's like, I think, do you know how when you're like, you're about to have a big conversation and you want to run through like the lines that you have like the justification or the apology or whatever? I think she is sort of running through the apology performatively here.
Right.
But if you look in the elevator shots, just the elevator shots, she has a tear on her cheek that looks like it wax.
Yeah.
Like it's not like tears. It looks like candle wax. And it's gone by the time she gets into the lab and meets Rocky. But in the elevator itself, it's so funny. Just like look on her cheek. You can't miss it.
It's very, very bonkers looking. She's gorgeous in this movie, too.
Of course. Yeah. It's Susan Sarandon, who's still gorgeous.
Still gorgeous. But so as she gets into the lab, she sees on the TV Brad and Dr. Frankenfurter sharing a cigarette. Hilarious.
Which is like, she is just like lamenting, like, how will I tell Brad that I cheated on him with Dr. Frankenfurter? And she like turns on the TV and it's Brad pretty much like post cheating on her with Dr. Frankenfurter, right?
Right. But she finds Rocky in the tank crying and she's like, oh, I'll dress your wounds. But they immediately go into touch me.
Yes.
And bang. Now, Magenta and Columbia are watching this like a sleepover. I do love that.
Yeah, I love it too. And they're like doing each other's hair. And Columbia, who was normally wearing like a sparkly top hat, in the scene is wearing Mickey Mouse ears from Disneyland.
From here forward through almost through the entire end of the movie.
Yeah.
Very wild. But after that happens, we see Frankenfurter, Brad, and Riff Raff come down the elevator and he's like, Frankenfurter's like whipping Riff Raff for letting Rocky out.
He's definitely giving him what I would call a performance evaluation.
Sure.
And he's beating the shit out of him. Like he's very upset with Riff Raff.
Yes. But they get interrupted because they have a visitor and it's Dr. Scott, the guy that Brad and Janet were going to see anyway, because allegedly he now works for the government for UFOs. We have had no indication that there are aliens before this point.
They identify as transsexuals from Transylvania, and that's a whole ass other planet.
Well, they don't say it's another planet until later.
I guess that's true. But also, it's a throwback to like 1950s, 60s like B horror movies. So it makes sense it would be UFO based.
Well, and it's only at this point, though, in the movie where they're like, aliens? Yeah. And you're like, I guess so. And Dr. Scott somehow gets in without anyone letting him in. And they're like, he's in the Zen room. And they're like, turn on the electromagnet. And it like yakety saxes his way up into the room. We will have fun facts about this entrance into the lab.
Really? Okay. It is kind of fun.
Because he does come through a wall.
Yes.
And they yell, Great Scott, which if you are watching this at a midnight screening is when you throw the toilet paper. Because it's Scott toilet paper. Now, he's like, Dr. Frankenfurter, we meet at last. Brad, what are you doing here? Oh, and this is, now Frankenfurter thinks they're all in on it together, but they're not.
Right. It's just a coincidence or whatever.
It's a coincidence. Dr. Scott is just there for Eddie because he's Eddie's uncle.
Yeah.
And he knows that Eddie was in with a bad crowd. But as this is happening, Janet and Rocky wake up And this is where there's a scene where everyone calls each other's names in succession for about 2 straight minutes. If you see this at a midnight showing, everyone screams every name.
Love it.
Where it's like, Janet, Dr. Scott, Brad, Janet, Dr. Scott, like all the way around.
Everyone except for Rocky says someone else's name.
Right.
And Rocky only turns his head to look at Dr. Frankenfurter every time Dr. Frankenfurter says his name.
Rocky.
And I wondered if this was like one of those things where they were like, if we did this 3 times, it would be funny. But they only captured it once on the day because it is the exact same shots repeated. Like it's exactly the same. And it makes me laugh every time. I love it.
The other piece that I always have thought about is it would have been extra funny if Rocky had only screamed the name Rocky. Because like he didn't really know anyone else's name.
Yeah.
Anyway, they get interrupted by Magenta with a gong giving the craziest line delivery I have ever heard. And it's, dinner is prepared.
Yeah.
And I was like, Kristen Wiig on SNL would not have put more emphasis on that. Like, that's insane.
She'd have gotten close, though. Kristen Wiig's a gem.
Prepared.
Yeah. We haven't mentioned this, but post-sex, Brad's rocking a kimono, more or less.
We don't know where he got it or who it came from.
I assumed he got it from the Dr. Frank Enfurter kimono collection.
Probably. But also, at this point, they're like, formal dress is optional given the situation because half of us are in various states of undress.
Right.
And then they go to the dinner party. Now, in the dinner party, it is all exposition. None of it makes sense. And it goes for about 10 minutes with nothing happening, with Frankenfurter quietly serving with an electric knife. So if you go to see this at a midnight screening, every shadow cast does something different during this time. And it depends on what shadow cast you're seeing. I've seen separate dance numbers. I've seen people put the lights on and everyone has a dance party in the audience to pass the time. Like, I have also seen, there was one cast where Janet and Lady Frankenfurter made out in front of everybody for the whole of this scene.
Would watch.
I mean, yeah, we did.
I also watched the whole of this scene and did not fast forward because Tim Curry is delivering, I think, the best performance he can when all of his lines are passive-aggressively use an electric knife.
Oh, hysterical. Just
like that stage
like to point
direction.
at people.
And he does.
Yeah.
It is very funny, but it is very slow. There does eventually get to like a dialogue part as they're like pouring wine all over the table and sort of into glasses and serving the food and stuff. And we really only just sort of discovered that Dr. Scott is the uncle of Eddie and that possibly also was brought to America via Operation Paperclip.
Yes.
But
it is implied.
It is, yeah.
There is a definitive stopping point if you are seeing this at a midnight screening.
Oh, is there? What is it?
It's toast.
Yes, okay.
A toast, because anytime you say a toast, you throw toast, although some theaters don't let you throw toast or rice because you're supposed to throw rice during weddings, toast during toasts, but it's a bitch to clean up.
Yeah.
So often they will not.
It's also food. So if you don't clean it up really, really well, you're going to get like mice and ants and shit. And that's I get it. That's a fair rule.
Some theaters have rules about it. Usually theaters will sell kits of what you're allowed to use. So you can just like pay $5 to get a kit.
We got to do this, Paige, please.
I've done it many times. Yeah, I'm down. It does always happen at midnight though.
I'm
so
fine.
like,
let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, a toast to absent friends. They then briefly discuss Eddie. We do get the electric knife pointing.
Yeah.
But this is where we get Dr. Scott's song. But, you know, I knew he was in with a bad crowd, but I didn't realize it was aliens. And this is also where they're like, oh, you think we're a bad crowd? Project Paperclip? Like, you clearly...
Yeah.
Hello. But, so we get the song about Eddie.
I do love the song about Eddie. And like, you knew from the moment he didn't like his teddy, like his teddy bear, you know he was a no good kid.
You knew he was a no good kid. I would have preferred it sung by Meatloaf because I feel like it, and he would have live in the stage show. And I feel like this sounds like a Meatloaf song. And so it's weird to have everyone else sing it instead.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. It doesn't bother me. I think it's silly. It's very funny. Like, he only liked...
Porn. No, it's something porn and a motorbike.
Yes, his switchblade knife. Like, it's all these, like, things that would code him as a bad boy, right?
Yeah.
And I love that, like, when it cuts back in the second verse... Dr. Scott now has the teddy bear that Eddie did not
like. He brought it with him.
Yeah, like he brought it with him to like come find Eddie. I thought it's just such a funny little beat that he's carrying the bear, but not in the first verse, only in the second verse. It's so funny.
And it looks brand new. It's clearly not a child. Like,
right.
He bought it on the way over.
Oh, and this song also features a note from Eddie that is sung by Eddie. And then you get a scream from Eddie like he's being killed again.
Yes. Hurry or I may be dead.
Yeah.
They must not carry out their evil deeds.
Yeah.
And as the song ends, Dr. Frankenfurter stands up and whips the tablecloth off, revealing that they have been eating over Eddie's decaying corpse this entire time and probably eating parts of Eddie.
Yeah. Hey, let me just put a button in what we were forgetting that Eddie liked.
Yes.
And I did look it up, and I'm so ashamed that I didn't know this. All he wanted was rock and roll porn and a motorbike.
Rock and roll porn and a motorbike.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of the rock and roll porn.
And then shooting up junk. Yeah.
Shooting up junk. My brain kept saying VHS porn, and I was like, no. Rock and roll porn and a motorbike.
Yeah.
But everyone screams. Columbia takes off. Brad pushes. Janet runs to Rocky. This makes Frankenfurter angry. She runs out to the lab. Yeah. Brad pushes Dr. Scott behind her. But this is where Frankenfurter is like, you better wise up, Janet Weiss. Yeah. Your apple pie don't taste too nice. I was like, oh, girl, shower. But
hey, man, she was rained on tonight. She had to dance.
She didn't know.
Yeah.
She didn't know.
Yeah. She didn't know it was going to be one of those nights. Come on, man.
Any apple pie is a privilege, right? It's like, apple pie is still apple pie.
Just be glad you got some apple pie, dog.
Yeah.
But he is chasing her like back into the lab as he's singing this, right? They're like running around the mansion or whatever.
And this is where, if you thought the logic of the movie had not broken down before, it completely breaks down at this point. Because he like flips a switch and they're all glued to the spot. And then he like flips a Medusa switch and they're all statues. And he's like, next we've got to go to the floor show. After we get multiple readings of the line, you're a hot dog, but you better not try to hurt her.
Frankfurter. Except for Susan Sarandon.
Foo Fighters.
Who gets, except for Susan Sarandon, who only gets like, you're a hot dog, and then he freezes her with the Medusa. Everyone gets to sing that line, and then he freezes them. That's it.
Right.
And then Columbia runs in and like reads him the riot act about how she feels about him. And then she gets frozen too. That's very much a moment of like, fuck you. You've ruined this. This was great. And you ruined it.
Right. Although we, up until this point in the movie, had no indication that there was an existing relationship between Columbia and Frankenfurter, only between her and Eddie.
I thought it was between her and Eddie, yeah.
Which makes this extra confusing when she was like, I used to love you. I loved you, damn it, I loved you. What did it give me? You threw me away for Eddie and then Eddie away for Rocky. You take. And you're like, what is this?
Yeah.
Where did this come from?
This is Little Nell giving her acting performance. She's like crushing it.
She's been in like 3 scenes and she has a whole monologue? Like, what's happening?
And a tap dance number page, and we have never been better for it.
There you go. But she gets Medusa'd as well.
Yes.
And then at this point, he's like, it's not easy having a good time. Like, my children are mean to me, and I split the brain between the two of them.
I do love because he's looking right at us for that. Like, it's not easy having a good time.
Yes.
Sometimes my face hurts from smiling. It's wonderful. Tim Curry is so great in this movie.
But this is where Magenta and Riff Raff are like, hey, when are we going to get to go home to our home planet? Because we're kind of over this shit. Tonight has been weird. We just want to leave. And he's like, I promise, like, when I'm in the mood, I can be generous. She's like, I've never asked you for anything. And he's like, then you'll get it in abundance. I'm just like, oh, damn. All right. We have to get ready for the floor show. And this, at 22 minutes to the end of the movie, for me is where the movie drags the most. Where it is literally 3 and some change back-to-back songs that do not necessarily relate to each other and do not further the story until they are abruptly stopped by a story point that we did not have enough support for in the rest of the movie. So we're like, what the fuck?
A story point I'll just summarize and we'll go into deeper later as, mutiny.
Mutiny. Yes.
And I agree, Paige. The song that meant the most to me from this when I initially watched it is one of those songs. I agree, though. This part of it does sort of drag.
Mm-hmm. Well, because we open on a theater ostensibly in the house.
Yes.
With a floored show.
And a pool. We don't know that yet, but it's there.
And a pool. We don't know that yet. We'll get to some discussions about the set design in the pool later.
Hell yeah.
But this first song is Rose Tint My World. I do really like this song.
Me too.
And all of these songs are like...
I like all of them.
Not bad on their own.
Even I'm Going Home. I like it.
See, I don't like...
It's Tim Curry's performance, man.
It's his performance, but it's also one of those things where I'm like, I have already sat through 2 ballads with no information.
I know. Like, I get it. I get why some people don't like it. It is for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, at least with Rose Tint My World, everyone has like a little solo. It does tell their story.
Yes.
And then they do a little dance, and then everyone does a dance together, including Dr. Scott.
Yes.
With his very fancy fishnets in his wheelchair.
His reveal that both he's been wearing fishnets the whole time and...
Oh, no. I assumed those were part of the dress up that Frankenfurter put them on him.
So for me, it was because it was a stage show. And ever since we've seen his character, he's been on stage. There was no way for them to do that.
And he's had a blanket.
Yes. So like... He had been wearing them the whole time. And
the actor definitely had been.
And I love the reveal of that. It's so funny to me. But also that at least that leg works. Like, he's not like...
Well, yeah, because he's like kicking it across the stage. I love it every time.
I want to point out when they're doing like the line and the can and everyone's kicking, they're kicking in different amounts. And if you watch Rocky kick, he has these like little baby kicks that are like barely kicking it, right? But like Susan Sarandon, even Boswick, they're like really kicking, but he is just like, Rocky's over there like little baby kicks. I love it.
So my favorite is in the solos in this song. Little Nell gets her full dance and also nips out.
Yeah.
But like she's clearly a trained dancer because she's doing these like cool burlesque moves and it's like pretty great. Rocky, it's kind of walky, not really dancey. And then for the solo dances, Barry Bostwick and Susan Sarandon are shot waist up until they get to the kicks at the end. And I was like, someone didn't have time to learn dances.
Yeah, and most people, even if you can't really dance, you could like figure out a can, you know, like it's just like standing in a line and sort of walking to the one side and kicking into the other side, you know?
Yeah. And we do see the RKO tower behind them, the Don't Dream It, Be It of it all. Because they start the Don't Dream It, Be It song.
Yes, the fanfare starts it. Like it's a trumpet section. Like the trumpets start it and then there's a slow push sort of past the floor show.
Yes.
And it zooms in on Tim Curry as he starts Don't Dream It, Be It. It's perfect. No notes. I love it.
Right. And then jumps into what we perceive as fog, but turns out to be a pool.
Yes.
And then everyone jumps in with him and it's like a little orgy. Here's the thing. I love the phrase, Don't Dream It, Be It. Love the idea.
Yeah.
Song needs more lyrics because it literally has that opening half a verse.
Yes.
And then it's just Don't Dream It, Be It for 2 minutes. And I'm like, guys, write a second verse.
You're not wrong. What would be the second verse is them singing Don't Dream It, Be It 48 times while they're having sort of a pool orgy. But I do want to point out a few things about this song that you may not notice the first time you watch it. And that is before everyone else jumps in the pool and Tim Curry is sitting in that little life preserver thing. It is from the HMS Titanic.
It is from the Titanic, but it appears to be an uncut shot.
It's definitely not. I don't think it is. Like, he can't have known exactly where that was underneath that because there is very clearly fog underneath that. I think he jumps in, he then climbs in that thing, and then they blow the smoke out of the way, and they just sped up that part of the shot.
I think so too, yes. Anyway, they climb back out of the pool after the orgy for a reprise of Rose Tint My World, starting with Wild and Untamed Thing.
I do love Wild and Untamed Thing, yeah.
And this is where we get the kicks.
It is.
But then they are interrupted by Riff Raff and Magenta dressed as aliens. And I do love these alien costumes. It is very Twilight Zone. I am here for it.
The costume choices for their, I don't know, alien look, I think is awesome. Because it's like, they are wearing like a similar uniform sort of. But her hair is like done up sort of beehive-ish. It's like a big ball.
It's Bride of Frankenstein.
And it's got the silver hair like in it. So it's very Bride of Frankenstein. His is doing something very weird and different, but it's like in a ponytail on top of his head. Like,
yes.
Because he doesn't have hair on the top of his head. He's got like a long bed skirt.
Yeah.
And now he's got that hair put up over his head.
Well, it's angled in the same way his gun is. And his gun looks like a giant fork.
It is leaning forward, right? His hair is like leaning forward.
Yeah.
I guess that actually, okay, so maybe that just signifies that he's been in captivity a long time because his dorsal fin is flopped over like that.
There you go.
I also do want to say this. The fork is a direct reference to the painting American Gothic by Grant Wood because you see that painting earlier. And if you're like, I don't know what painting that is, you've seen it. It's like the old people in front of a farmhouse. It's like a man and his wife and he's holding a pitchfork. And it's like a play on that, which I kind of love because it looks like that pitchfork.
I do. I also think there is also a sci-fi movie from the time that has a very similar one too.
Oh, really? Okay.
So, which also may have pulled from American Gothic. But part of the reason they're pulling from American Gothic here is literally the lines he's saying where he's like, your mission is a failure. Your lifestyle's too extreme.
Yeah. And as a representation of like the normal American home or whatever, right? Yeah.
Right. Yes. And they're going to go back to Transylvania, prepare the transit beam. And then this is where we get Tim Curry singing I'm Going Home, which is a great performance.
I love it.
But again, it does not relate to anything happening in the movie. He's just killing it. And there's like a fake audience that he's like saying goodbye to as if it's like his fans and constituents.
He's literally turning away, giving autographs to people that page are not there. And that to me is hilarious every time. Also, as they say, we're going to go back to Transylvania, he whispers in a few people's ears, like Columbia goes and turns the spotlight on or whatever.
To get the spotlight on him.
I love that what he whispers, the inaudible dialogue that it says in the captions, wasn't something that like will sustain Columbia after he's gone. It wasn't like some sweet message. It was like, get me a fucking spotlight, Columbia. And I sort of love that for Dr. Frankenfurter's character. And I do love that this whole like almost 3-minute song, I guess, is him assuming that he's leaving and going with them to Transylvania. And then it leaves with Riff Raff being like, I probably should have cut you off a long time ago. Because when I said we, I meant me and my sister. We're just going to kill you.
Yes.
It's very funny to me that they let him do this whole 3-minute song and then just kill him.
Right. To drive the point home, Columbia's like, no, and they get her first.
Yeah, Columbia.
R.I.P. Columbia.
I know.
But then Frankenfurter runs and tries to climb the
curtain. Yeah, he's trying to get away.
They get him on the curtain. He falls. Rocky mad. But then we get like a 5-minute recreation of King Kong as he puts.
Oh, I don't think it's 5 minutes, but it's long. It is long.
It's a long time.
Yeah. But he does like carry Tim Curry to the top of the RKO like radio tower and then it falls into the pool. Yeah.
And then we get Magenta. You killed them. I thought you liked them. They liked you. And he's like, they didn't like me. And we're like, I mean, we saw that, but like, this is a wild, like, outburst. Okay. And then Dr. Scott's like, you did the right thing. And he's like,
I do love that.
Sorry about your nephew, but you guys should leave while it's still possible. We're going to take the entire house back to our planet.
I do love that Dr. Scott, after watching someone murder somebody, knew exactly how to play it to get out of there alive. And that was just double down on whatever actions that person did to get out of this situation. Now, Dr. Scott actually says some things that like he had killed people. So like society does have to be protected. So I think Dr. Scott does actually believe that he deserved to die.
He did the right thing.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not saying he's making it up here, but if you ever find yourself in that situation, just like do whatever you have to get out of that.
Yeah. But they're going to return to their planet to dance the time warp again.
I low-key love the transition between them talking about the time warp, about how it's going to take them back, and the reprise of Time Warp, because it's like them performatively saying the lyrics and then it cutting to the song itself. It's really well done. I love it.
Mm-hmm. It's real fun, but as that's happening, Brad and Janet escape with Dr. Scott, and the house takes off but not, because it's still very much there in the background because they did not have money. But they all end up on the ground. We cut to the criminologist, and crawling on the planet's face, some insects called the human race, lost in time and lost in space and meaning.
Yeah.
Credits.
I love it.
And that's the movie.
So, Paige, having seen the movie a million times, having talked about the movie, what did you think about the Rocky Horror Picture Show?
I mean, I do enjoy it. I feel like it's more fun at a midnight screening.
Yeah.
It's not that it's not fun watching it on your own. It is, and the music is fun and everything. I do think that some of the plot issues and the places where it doesn't make sense and the places where it drags are way, 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 way more obvious when you're watching it just at home.
When you're just stone cold watching it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah. And maybe get rip shit on lewds.
Yes. This is definitely a movie you don't want to look at through a critical lens, which I think a lot of camp is that way. Like, I don't care that things don't make sense because it is so heightened and so campy and silly. Like, it doesn't bother me at all. And my brain does, perhaps incorrectly, fill in a lot of those gaps, as we found, right? But man, this movie meant so much to me when I first saw it. I love it. I'll watch it a million times. I mean, Don't Dream It, Be It sort of became my YOLO, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, like, it was very much that same sentiment for me. I didn't get a Don't Dream It, Be It tattoo, but I definitely get why, if YOLO was yours, you have a YOLO tattoo. You know what I'm saying?
A lot of people have Don't Dream It, Be It tattoos. I think for me, I have a limit to what I can suspend for camp. And for me, the first 49 minutes, no notes.
Yeah.
Here for you all the way. The last half, there's a reason I usually turn it off at 49 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, the wheels come off of it, for sure. I like it, but the wheels are off in the last 45 minutes of the movie, yeah. But Paige, do you have any fun facts for us that, honestly, we haven't spoiled yet?
Yeah, oh my God. No, and we will not get through a ton of them. There are so many fun facts. If you are really interested, go digging, for sure.
I'm sure there are so many. But Paige, hit us with your fun facts.
Meatloaf,
Rocky, fun facts.
Let's start with Jeff's story about Meatloaf. Now that Meatloaf's dead, there's no one to come after him about it. So Jeff often moderates panels at Comic-Con, and he got called to moderate a panel with Meatloaf and showed up ahead of time and was like, nice to meet you, Meat. Like, is there anything I can, facilitate for you? Anything you want to talk about, don't want to talk about, let me know. And Meatloaf was like, I don't need your fucking help, man. And he was like, okay. And so Meatloaf did the panel alone and it went really bad. And then was like really mad that it went bad. And I was like, well, yeah, you shouldn't just do panels alone. Like, that's what?
Moderators are there for a purpose, bro.
Yeah. So
that
was Jeff's story. He was like, I've hated him ever since. His music's not that good. I was like, his music is good, but fine.
He had a few good songs and a few good albums. I don't know,
I like him. I like his voice. I think his voice
like
is
his
really
voice
good.
too, yeah.
So when this movie first opened, it did have a traditional release, but it bombed super hard.
Yeah.
Meatloaf actually said that he attended an opening week performance with the writer and director Jim Sharman in the Midwest, and they were the only ones in the theater.
It's in the Midwest. That does not surprise me at all.
Yeah. Most people assume that the midnight screenings started right after. They did not. It took a few years. Most midnight screenings became popular around 1978.
Yeah, the first ever midnight screening being a thing. I'm not even sure if this was Rocky Horror, but that didn't start until 76, and that was a theater in New York. I think it was the Waverly that started that trend.
The Waverly does the first one.
Wait, is it the first one of this?
Of Rocky Horror as well.
Okay. Well, maybe that was the one they did in 76, but it wasn't like a super popular thing. It was just the guy at the Waverly liked it and did a midnight showing.
Yes, and it wasn't a recurring thing yet, and they would show it as a double feature with Phantom of the Paradise, which is another musical rock opera from this time.
Yeah.
And so it began showing in a few cities. Here's something unique, though. You know how I said the midnight showings didn't really start till 1978?
Yeah.
It happened occasionally in New York, LA, and then later San Francisco, enough that technically the movie has remained in theaters since 1975, making it the longest theatrical run in history because it has continuously been in theaters for 50 years.
I love that.
Now, there is a museum of cinema in Munich, Germany, that has screened it every week since 1977, and they offer kits. Now, most of the times that I've been to live midnight screenings, they have offered kits.
Yeah.
Usually they contain toast, or in some cases crackers, rice, a whistle, a candle or a lighter for There's a Light at the Frankenstein place.
I bet I can guess where that candle gets thrown.
Yeah, usually it gets blown out for fires.
Oh, okay.
And then a sheet of paper with instructions for how to do the time warp, usually with the diagram on it.
Hell yes.
But that's pretty common. But it did so badly initially that was their only option, and it only happened in a handful of theaters, and then it grew from there.
Yeah.
So Tim Curry has said that he got to meet King Charles and Princess Diana because she loved this movie and requested to meet Tim Curry. And essentially, Prince Charles only vaguely recognized Tim Curry from seeing him, quote, on television. But Princess Diana leaned in and said that Rocky Horror had quite completed her education.
Thank you for making me love her so much more. That's awesome.
I mean, hard not to love Princess Diana. Princess Diana is dope.
Yeah.
In the dinner scene, when Barry Bostwick pounds his fist on the table, he accidentally pounded it directly down onto Susan Sarandon's hand.
Oh,
and so the reaction from her is very real. But she got her revenge by accidentally stepping on his foot with her very spiky heel during the floor show.
Accidentally.
His reaction is also visible. They only had 5 weeks to film this in Bray near Windsor, England.
Oh, okay.
Barry Bostwick has said that he was always wet during filming because the castle had a leak, and there was only one warm room filled with space heaters where cast members took turns warming up until the room eventually caught fire, which is kind of a bummer because Susan Sarandon, because of the cold and other things, caught pneumonia. Like, she was super fucking sick, but decided to stay and finish the movie. And Richard O'Brien and others have said she should have absolutely been under medical supervision, and instead the studio pushed her to keep working.
Well, yeah.
And it was not good.
That does not come through in her performance. Like, she still does an amazing job.
No, she did great.
So, like, good Lord. Well done, Susan Sarandon.
Yes. Tim Curry was very reluctant to talk about this movie for a long time because he had some bad interactions with overzealous fans. And he has even told people in interviews, including one with VH1, that he grew, quote, chubby and plain to try escaping the role of Frank. He then later became much more comfortable talking about the movie, and he said that it is a rite of passage for teenagers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what, yeah, I get that.
Yep. Now, this movie had kind of a shoestring budget, even by 1970s dollars, and they were pressured by time. But Tim Curry's makeup took 4 hours to apply.
Wow.
So he learned how to do it himself.
What?
Yes.
He did his own makeup?
Mm-hmm.
Good God.
For much of this movie. It was designed by Pierre LaRoche, and then he learned how to do it.
Yeah.
Now, unlike the live show where they would party all night, there was very little partying during production, in part because everyone was fucking sick, and B, because they were working 16-hour days at times to try and finish this movie.
Man.
Let's talk about Dr. Scott crashing through the wall.
Okay.
Originally, he was supposed to come through a door, but the set builders forgot to put an extra door in the lab set. And the lab was actually downstairs from what they called the pit, which would become the pool.
Okay.
So that wall is shared with the pool. So they shot all the lab stuff and then shot the pool stuff and then had to drain the pool and break through the wall to then go back and shoot in the lab again.
Okay. I bet that hurt going through it because it does look at least like it's the actor going through that wall.
Yeah. As far as the pneumonia, she caught it after filming the pool scene.
Yeah. I bet that day was so cold. You can sort of see it on their faces. It's very cold.
Yes, it's very cold, and there were no bathrooms in the castle. You had to go off set to go to the bathroom.
I hate that for them.
It was not good. Steve Martin also auditioned for the role of Brad Majors. I think he also would have done good. I think that would have been really funny.
Yeah.
Allegedly, according to an interview with Richard O'Brien in 2013, Barry Bostwick and Susan Sarandon were actually dating during filming. Allegedly. I did not find a ton to back that up other than that one interview.
Fair enough. Okay. I did know that the place they shot this is now a hotel and you can stay there.
Yes.
I thought that was super cool and I would love to stay there one day. I don't know. I think it's like Oakley Castle or something.
Yes. We'll get to a bunch of other things that were shot there too, because it's been in a ton of movies.
Oh, I just looked it up. It's Oakley Court is what it's called. Sorry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They did create a plug to fit over Rocky's belly button because
he wouldn't
in theory,
have
he
one,
wouldn't have had an umbilical cord.
Right.
Yep. In order, the movies referenced in the opening number are The Day the Earth Stood Still, the Flash Gordon multi-film franchise, The Invisible Man, King Kong, It Came from Outer Space, which is the source material for The Thing.
Yeah.
Dr. X, Forbidden Planet, Tarantula, Day of the Triffids, The Curse of the Demon, and When Worlds Collide.
Awesome.
Vincent Price was offered the role of the criminologist, but turned it down due to scheduling conflicts.
Oh, man.
He had actually seen the stage play and loved it, was actually very bummed that he could not make it work.
Vincent Price would have made it like, it would have just given it that
perfect
feel, right?
Yes.
I do love the criminologist, though. I don't really think I've seen him in anything else, maybe, but like, I love the guy who plays him, but Vincent Price is iconic.
That would have been incredible. And he's got that crazy voice, too.
Yeah.
That would have been perfect. The song I Can Make You a Man is literally stolen from, and by stolen, I mean the lyrics are lifted directly from 1940s and 50s Charles Atlas ads with the slogan, in just 7 days, I can make you a man.
Amazing.
Similarly, Richard O'Brien took the line, don't dream it, be it, from an ad on the back of a magazine.
I mean, it's a great line.
Thanks, Don Draper, or whoever wrote it. 20th Century Fox originally offered a much larger budget on the condition that they cast popular musicians of the day. But Jim Sharman refused. He wanted to use the original cast.
Good.
So as a compromise, he accepted a much smaller budget. Had they gone with a larger budget, either David Bowie or Mick Jagger would have played Frankenfurter.
I mean, David Bowie would have loved it. I don't know about Mick Jagger. I've never seen him act.
I've seen him on SNL. That's about the breadth of what I've seen. But this would have also been younger Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
I think Bowie would have fucking crushed it.
Definitely.
But also, Tim Curry made this his own.
Yes.
It is iconic.
I think one of the reasons this movie has the stay power it does is on the back of Tim Curry's performance. And everyone's good in it.
Yes.
But Tim Curry is just insane. It's amazing.
Well, and Tim Curry had also done it on stage for a long time.
Yes.
And so I feel like had a very personal connection to Frankenfurter and had kind of made it his own role. He has stated that he believes Frank is pansexual.
Yes.
And I was like, that's clear. That's on the screen.
Yeah.
Peter Hinwood, who played Rocky, is now an antiques dealer. And contrary to a popular rumor, he's never thrown anyone out of his shop for talking about the movie. But he does see it as, quote, part of the past and doesn't usually talk about it. He also was overdubbed in the movie. So he knew, because he could not sing, that he was going to be overdubbed for singing. And so they shot it all with him lip syncing. But then in the final cut, they didn't like the sound of his dialogue either or the singing. So they overdubbed again.
Wow. Okay. So it's not even his voice then.
It's not even his voice.
Wow. Okay.
No.
He doesn't have a lot of lines, but yeah.
No. Yeah. Tim Curry, when he is cracking the whip, is actually cracking it against the floor, but one time missed and actually got Richard O'Brien.
I bet that hurt. He's like, I wrote this and I'm getting whipped in it.
Now, according to Meatloaf, preparations for the motorcycle scene led to many on-set accidents and injuries. One of the first stuntmen drove the motorcycle through the scene up and down the ramps, but the bike fell off the top tier and landed upside down, pinning the stuntman underneath.
Oh my God. Did he survive? Like that? I mean, motorcycles are like 700 pounds at least.
Yes, Meatloaf ran over and lifted the bike just enough to move the stuntman out of the way, but he was unconscious for some time.
I bet.
Before eventually opening his eyes and telling everyone he was okay. That stuntman later told Meatloaf that he was conscious, but it was an old stuntman trick to make sure he wasn't suffering any pain or serious injuries before moving.
Interesting. Okay.
After that happened, it was determined that it was much too dangerous to have Meatloaf riding the bike around an all-tile room.
Yeah.
And so the crew rigged a wheelchair that would hold a set of handlebars and a motorcycle windshield in front of the camera as the crew pulled it up and down the steps. In the middle of shooting, the wheelchair hit a ridge at the bottom of the steps, sending him flying towards the floor, shattering the camera and the fake windshield. His stuntman tried to catch him, but the ramp caught the stuntman's leg and fractured it. Meatloaf also, because he flew through the fake windshield, got a deep cut on his head, which is why it becomes more prominent as they go.
Wild.
Yes.
Okay, that scene seems brutal. And I mean, like, motorcycles are heavy and tile floors are slick. So if you're not moving at a speed of like maybe 20 miles an hour or faster, which there's no chance to get up to in that room, like you have to hold the bike up with your legs. You have to.
Yeah.
And if your legs are sliding, it's going to fall. Like that must have been a very dangerous scene to shoot.
Very.
But they get rid of it almost immediately because of that.
Because of that, yes.
Yeah.
So Tim Curry has been described as the opposite of Frankenfurter, very kind of quiet and soft-spoken.
Yeah.
And the boisterous mannerisms come when he kind of puts on Frankenfurter, which if you've spent any considerable time around drag performers, there's always a point in their drag preparation at which the character takes over.
Yes.
And for Tim Curry, it's the heels.
Interesting.
That Frank comes when the heels come on.
I love it.
But yes, I think that's really fun. They asked Susan Sarandon to perform nude during Touch Me, and she said no.
You know what?
Despite
Good for
having
her.
been nude in other films, but good for her. Aside from the chemical symbols scrawled on the wall of the lab next to the control panel, there's a grocery list calling for flour, eggs, bread, sugar, and 2 hypodermics. Oh, the final number, Superheroes, or I'm Going Home is usually how we know it, was originally mostly included on UK exclusive prints of the movie, although it has shown up on some American prints. The digital version that you watch almost always includes it.
Yeah.
So I have never seen it without.
Me either.
At a certain point, it was always included. Which, let's talk about prints for a minute. How and why does this get to be shown for 50 years? Well, for a long time, 20th Century Fox had a policy of basically allowing you to show any of their air quotes classics for free if you were going to show them in a theater under certain conditions. And this was listed as one of those movies. Now, when they were bought out and Disney bought most of their back catalog for Disney Plus in 2019, and they started archiving a lot of those classics for digital streaming, this is the one exception they made.
Wow.
And so it's one of the few movies that any theater can order at any time and show without having to kind of go through a rigorous process to get permission. You can show it at any time. And Disney did it out of essentially respect for this movie's legacy. It is also available on, it's Hulu Plus, but it does play on Disney Plus. But you do have to enter your age code.
Yeah.
If you do
Of course.
it.
Of course. Yeah.
Oakley Court was used in numerous Hammer horror films made at Bray Studios, which is right next to it, which is where the lab and ballroom was at the studios because they built those. But the House in Nightmare Park, The Reptile, The Brides of Dracula, and The Man in Black were all shot at Oakley Court. Built in 1859, it was refurbished in 1981, right after this movie, and converted into a hotel, which is why you can now stay there.
And I would love to stay there.
Yep. Peter Hinwood, who played Rocky, found the tiny gold hot pants in his home while I think just cleaning up in the 1990s.
They better be in his antique store because they are both antique and amazing.
He sold them at auction and Hard Rock Cafe purchased them. So you can see them in the memorabilia collection. I believe they're now in Las Vegas.
Okay.
At the Hard Rock.
Awesome. I hope he got a shitload of money, man.
The first midnight showing was on April Fool's Day in 1976 at the Waverly Theater in New York City's Greenwich Village.
Nice.
Now, remember I said this has been continually showing since 1975?
Yes.
That's because it actually featured in a handful of film festivals in 1975 before this midnight showing as their secret midnight movie. So it's not necessarily a normal midnight showing, but yes, it has been in theaters ever since. The lips on the poster belong to Lorelei Shark, who similarly lended her lips to billboard ads for Chicago rock station WLUP, The Loop. So
she was like a lip model? That's kind of interesting.
No, I believe she was a regular model, but just had nice lips. And so she did a bunch of other modeling, but this is the most famous, oddly enough.
Awesome.
Yeah. When Richard O'Brien originally wrote this, he envisioned himself playing Eddie, but ultimately thought Meatloaf was a better fit.
Yeah.
And agreed.
Yeah. He's got Riff Raff vibes, not Eddie vibes.
Yep. Now, all of the movies that they reference, they actually also pay homage to the studios that made them in tiny little kind of Easter eggs in the movie. So the Warner Brothers logo is the shield the Griffin holds. Republic Films is the eagle in the hall. RKO is pretty obvious.
Yes.
Columbia is named for Columbia.
Got it.
Anglo Amalgamated Productions, the large Atlas painting in the grand bedchamber is the symbol of the company.
Yeah.
MGM is the large lion snarling in the hall. Then there's Universal, the lighted globe at the end of the film. The J. Arthur Rank organization is the gong. The movie's all opened with a huge gong. And Disney, Columbia wears Mickey Mouse ears in the scenes in the bedroom with magenta.
Okay.
All of the corsets had to be doubled from the pool scene so that one version could dry while the other was being worn.
Yeah.
Because they were getting sick from being cold. On the criminologist's desk, there are 2 framed pictures. One is FDR, a late U.S. president at the time, and the other was Ronald Reagan, who had not yet become president, but had been an actor in many of those sci-fi B movies.
Yes, and would become president in 1980.
Yep. Now, Tim Curry, when he originally started playing Frankenfurter in the stage play, used a German accent, given the name, but then heard a woman with a very posh accent that he thought sounded very, very funny. And so he has kind of modeled what we know as the Frankenfurter voice now after that lady, Queen Elizabeth II, and his mother. It's like a combination of those 3.
Oh, I love it.
And I do kind of love that.
Yeah. The reason that completed Diana's education is because he stole his vibe half from her mother-in-law.
Yep. I'll end on this one. Because of time and budget constraints, there's very little coverage, which is where you shoot extra takes of things.
Yes.
So when you mention Rocky and they use the same, that very much that is what happened.
Yeah.
Most scenes were edited in camera with only a few takes per setup.
Wow.
One exception
Okay.
was the Rocky Horror birth scene where they're trying to mimic the style of old Hammer movies. So they took shots from multiple angles and edited them together. But by editing in camera, that means you have to get it right in order to move fast. So those are your fun facts.
Well, thank you for those fun facts, Paige. Let's talk a little bit about box office. And we've talked a lot about how it wasn't a success. And I don't actually have its initial release in U.S. theaters, like how much it made, because it's like lost to time. But I do know the budget for the movie was $1.4 million, which is pretty low. I mean, even at the time, that's like it's like 8.2 today. So it's still a pretty low budget even today. And we did talk about how it became sort of a commercial success through midnight showing. So I'm not going to go over that again, but I will say to date, it's made at least, they say, $112 million in theaters because of all those midnight showings and things like that. It definitely has made its budget back, but it didn't initially in theaters.
There you go.
But that's your box office. Paige, do you want to do the scary scale?
It's not scary.
This has horror in the name, and it does play on those tropes, obviously. It was a one for me. I'm assuming same for you.
Same.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this week, Paige, you gave me the gift of getting to do an episode on one of my favorite movies, and thank you so much for that. Next week, I am going to return the favor, although I'm not sure if you've seen the movie. But I know you've wanted to see it. So next week, I am going to give you the gift of Maxxxine as we venture into this.
Yay, I have not seen it. I'm very excited to watch it.
Nice. Okay, well, I mean, I hope it's everything you want it to be.
Todd, do you have any reviews for us?
We absolutely do have some amazing comments on our most recent episode, and that is our I Saw the TV Glow episode with the amazing Joe K. This one comes in from Sarah's. Sorry if I butchered your name, but they say, I've met Felicia Rose at a convention and she was extremely nice. Also got to hear her do a Q&A about LGBT plus representation in horror and her journey since the film. Definitely meet her if you get the chance.
Oh, nice.
So Sarah, thank you so much for that awesome recommendation and the comment on Spotify. We appreciate it. And if you want to have me read your 5-star Apple review or Spotify comment, leave one of those things and I'll do just that. So guys, if you like this show but want to hear Paige and I talk about romantic comedies or just regular romantic movies, check out our other podcast. Some might call it a sister podcast called Romancing the Pod, where we do just that weekly. It's a lot like this show, but for romance and romantic comedies because Paige doesn't like them. So we make her watch them, just like you guys make me watch horror over here. But if you want to follow me, I am at Todd J. Awesome on all the social media. Paige is at Rampage Wesley on Instagram?
Yes, and TikTok.
And just Paige Wesley on Twitter, because you got that before some CEO lady and she wanted it, but you wouldn't give it back. And I respect you for that.
Refuse.
Also, Paige
Suck it, other Paige Wesley.
Paige is also on another podcast. It's great. You should check it out. It's called Cult Podcast with Armando Torres, who is a wonderful person. And if you want to support this show, go to Patreon at patreon.com/horrorvirgin, where there are a lot of great levels and a lot of great things. We do the Patreon shout outs at the beginning of every episode. We do listener requests, stuff like that, bonus episodes. So you'll be getting all of that content, plus episodes a day early with no ads, and who doesn't love that? So sign up for the Patreon and get a lot of great stuff.
That's going to be it for us, you guys. I'm Paige.
And I'm your horror virgin, Todd.
Keep it ooky spooky.
Yeah. Have an amazing week, guys. Bye.